The word SpongeBob and timeline are two words that are not keen to be in the same sentence. There's rarely been a clear date or when certain episodes happened, and it's even worse these days when you look at the most recent seasons like season 15 and 16, or spin-offs like Camp Coral or Patrick Star Show, respectively. Every single one of them seems like they've got their own version or backstory that they believe in. So much so that longtime fans could easily be confused as to which or what version of the past are the true ones. Some might even say this has been quite a paradoxical problem. Now, you might think this is caused by a bunch of unstructured or lazy timeline problems made by a writer too lazy to connect each one, where each one would just shove their own idea instead of continuing something that already exists. But if anything, the biggest mistake they made is that they never bothered to come up with a bigger, deeper explanation for this problem, even though they could have. And so, in the process of finding the true timeline of SpongeBob, I ironically stumbled on something way bigger than I expected. I accidentally solved the SpongeBob timeline paradox. If we're talking about changing the past kind of episodes, the ones who instantly come to mind are, of course, Back to the Past from Season 7. After helping our senile superheroes, SpongeBob and Patrick get a tour inside the Merma Lair and spot an old, dusty time machine by Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, which of course, tell them not to touch it. Patrick touches it anyway, and because of that, Man Ray wins a fight he was supposed to lose, which means when SpongeBob and Patrick get back to the present, Bikini Bottom isn't the same as when they left it. It's called Man Ray-opolis, where there's a new version of the Krusty Krab. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy work there now, as fry cook and cashier, because Man Ray's been ruling the city this whole time. One barrel of tartar sauce is all it takes to change the future. But they have done something even stranger earlier before in Season 4, Dunces and Dragons. The story where SpongeBob and Patrick go to a jousting event at a Ren fair, get bucked off their seahorses, and land in medieval Bikini Bottom, complete with its own king, its own castle, big monster, and of course, an evil wizard. But despite all the magic and weird creatures in this point of time, there is an old prophecy that says there will be a pair of heroes coming to save the kingdom from the evil Planktonomor. Even though the so-called heroes are coming from the future, which means in an event SpongeBob and Patrick fail to defeat Planktonomor in this era, Bikini Bottom could be a very different place too, when they got back at the end. Just like what happened in Back to the Past. Some of you might think now Dunces and Dragons are not the real past, it could just be SpongeBob and Patrick's wild dream in the middle of a concussion. However, Squidly is a real person. He's officially recognized as Squidward's ancestor from the past. Not to mention, he's the one that cursed his bloodline to suck at clarinet, hence closing any of Squidward's chances at being an artist. And let's not forget, Squidly went back to the future somehow. You'd think that's a season 1 through 8 problem. It's not, because wouldn't you know it, they still do these sort of things in 2025. Now, just in case you haven't catched up with modern episodes, Patrick's family basically got an expansion, or revamp, or whatever you would call it. He has grandparents, brand new parents, and a little sister that arguably should be Squidward's sister, Squidina. He also has a brand new, bigger house where all the members of this family lived in, along with a time machine disguised as a closet, which in this episode is experiencing some technical issues, resulting in his entire family getting flung into classic Season 1 episodes. Grandpat gets SpongeBob's job at the Krusty Krab. Patrick's dad rips SpongeBob's pants instead of SpongeBob. They basically rewrite the classic episodes by replacing SpongeBob with themselves, but SpongeBob manages to fix it all up in the end, so it's all good. So at this point, it's easy to assume, is this just a running bit the writers keep going back to because it's easy? Or is one wrong move creating a whole new reality actually a thing in this universe? universe. Because if it's a yes, that changes what happens next. And as we all would remember, it creates something that was never supposed to have a beginning at all. There's another kind of time travel this show does, which might be even more confusing. One day, Squidward's hiding from SpongeBob and Patrick, as usual, and ends up locking himself in the Krusty Krab freezer. Except nobody comes looking for him, not for 2,000 years. When he wakes up, it's the future. Chrome everywhere, 486 Spongetrons, and all Squidward wants is to get back home. So unfortunately, being Squidward, he doesn't just go back to his own time. He goes further, all the way back to prehistoric Bikini Bottom, where he runs into cavemen versions of SpongeBob and Patrick, tormenting themselves with jellyfish because they don't know any better. So, to shut them up, he teaches them how to actually jellyfish. Now, here's the thing. Present-day SpongeBob already knows how to jellyfish. In fact, that's literally what kicks off this exact episode. SpongeBob dragging Squidward out to go do it. But where did they learn it? From Squidward, who taught it to their ancestors, who passed it down for 2,000 years, until it reached the guy who taught it to Squidward in the first place. There's no starting point. It's a circle where somebody invented jellyfishing, and that somebody was everybody, and also nobody at the same time. And the show just moves on. But for better or worse, this isn't the only closed-loop time travel paradox in this show, since they did it again for the Patterfly effect. Over on the Patrick Star Show, Patrick loses the time closet, the actual device his whole family uses to travel through history for, birthday parties and grocery runs at this point, and Squidina tells him something important. Building a working time machine isn't a 5-minute fix. It takes actual, real education. So Patrick does the only thing he can. He goes to college. And he actually does it. He reinvents the thing, puts the time closet back in his room like nothing happened. Except, and this is the part that should stop you, an older version of Patrick then goes back in time to stop his younger self from ever using the time closet to begin with. So which is it? Did Patrick invent the time closet through years of hard work at college? Or did he only go to college because an older version of himself came back and set the whole thing in motion by trying to stop it? Whew. Same shape as Squidward's loop. There's no beginning, just a circle that's always been spinning. Which raises a much less funny question than, did the writers mess up again? Because there's one more case, and for this one, nobody was messing around by accident. Somebody did this on purpose. The whole reason people even started asking questions about this show's timeline in the first place. Because in Camp Coral, SpongeBob and Sandy already know each other as kids. Except in the actual season 1 premiere, Tea at the Tree Dome, SpongeBob doesn't even know what a squirrel is. He has to look her up in a book. They meet as complete strangers as adults. So, which one happened? Turns out the show already answered this, quietly, in an episode about a burger. At the end of Kitchen Sponge, young Sandy sneaks off with some kind of acorn-powered radio and gets a transmission from herself from the future. Adult Sandy, present-day Sandy, the one we've been watching for 20 plus years, talking to her own child self back at summer camp. I knew sending you to Camp Coral was the right thing to do. Sandy specifically meddled with the timeline so young Sandy could sabotage Plankton and destroy a Krabby Patty formula before it could ever get discovered. Now, compare that to everything we just went through. Patrick and SpongeBob stumble into Mermaid Man's warehouse. Squidward locked himself in a freezer by accident. Even Patrick's own time loop was something that just happened to him, driven by circumstance. This isn't that. This is someone who already understood exactly how the concept of time works, making a calculated, deliberate change to her own history, and getting away with it. And if you think that's a one-time thing, season 14 goes back to this exact same thing as well. Plankton gets trapped in a time capsule and shot 2,000 years into the future. Same setup as SB-129 on purpose, right down to the title card. And who's the one who brings him back? Sandy. and before she sends him home, she wipes his memory, specifically so he won't remember what he saw, or what it could do to the timeline if he did. Both times, she's the one who understands the stakes, makes the call, and cleans up after herself so nobody else ever has to know it happened. So the real question isn't, did the writers connect Camp Coral to the main show? They already told us they did with these episodes. The bigger, real question became, why does Sandy Cheeks know exactly how to do this? And why has nobody ever asked where she learned it? What makes me question this is because this isn't a world without any explanation for smart people. Bikini Bottom has an actual university. Plankton went to it. Patrick went to it. That's what higher education looks like in this world. Meanwhile, Sandy doesn't have one of those scenes ever. What she does have is a job. Season 4, Chimps Ahoy, where her employers show up. 3 chimps from a company called Tree Dome Enterprises. And it turns out her funding was never actually about her stated mission. Remember, she came here, according to the show, to study sea creatures. Except that's not what they're here to check. They're here to review her inventions. That's what she's actually paid for. Producing technology, not writing up field notes on jellyfish. And nobody in that episode, not the chimps, not Sandy, not anybody, ever explains why being at the bottom of the ocean is what lets her do that. Now, 3 years later, this show puts her in a room with an actual lost, technologically advanced civilization. Everybody in the group gets a stated want. Krabs wants the gold. Squidward wants the art. SpongeBob and Patrick want to see a bubble. And when the group splits up, she's the one who goes straight for the lab. And it's not a one-time thing. There's a whole short where she personally leads an expedition into the ruins of a dead civilization, Lemuria, whose only survivors are robots that have spent literal millennia maintaining leftover ancient technology. Not gold, not sightseeing, the tech specifically is what she came for. So let's actually count what she's built. Off the back of that same unexplained pull toward ancient advanced machinery, a working teleportation device built at home, a portal to other dimensions. Her exact words, "I built it to explore the universe." Casual as building a birdhouse. And the time closet, the device Patrick's entire family has been using this whole video to jump around history, to rewrite season 1, to create every single loop we've talked about before, officially on the record, the show's own character profile, invented by Sandy. Every impossible machine we've covered tonight has her fingerprints on it, directly or one invention removed. And here's what actually messed with my head. Nobody in Bikini Bottom treats any of this as strange. A squirrel builds a functioning time machine in her backyard, and the reaction from an entire city is nothing. No headline, no Bikini Bottom University asking for a guest lecture. They think it's as normal as Plankton failing to steal a formula for the 1000th time, which makes me start to think the real question was never which timeline is the real one, it's what did she find down here before any of us were watching, and how much of this show have we actually been watching unfold on her terms the entire time? So let's go back to where we started, because everything we just went through actually explains it. The tonal shift after the first movie, the Krusty Krab 2 that just disappears, Plankton walking free instead of in a straitjacket, Patrick basically admitting on camera that he's been faking it, Sandy getting arrested for a crime she didn't commit by cops who were laughing right along a minute earlier. For 20 years, that's been the writers got lazy. But look at what we just spent this whole video proving this show can actually do. It can branch off an entire alternate reality from one wrong move and never fully clean it up. Remember, Back to the Past doesn't even show you the ending. It cuts away mid-collapse and just moves on to the next episode like nothing happened. but it can also do the opposite. Notice a break. Treat it like an emergency and fix it on screen in front of you, like it did with Patrick's family just last year. So, which one happened at the end of the first movie? Nobody's ever gone back to fix it. No timeline twist-up for the Krusty Krab 2. No episode where Squidina rewinds the time closet and undoes whatever caused Plankton to walk out of that straitjacket. It's just been sitting there, unrepaired for 20 years. Exactly the same shape of the one kind of break this show has shown us it's capable of leaving behind. And now you know who actually has the ability to go back and fix something like that. She's done it before, cleanly. Camp Coral is proof she can rewrite her own history and walk away with nobody the wiser. She had the means, and going by everything we just laid out about what she's actually been chasing this whole time, she's never lacked the motive to keep tinkering with things most people wouldn't even know were broken. Maybe she doesn't want to. Maybe some of this really is just the writers doing what writers do. I can't prove the intent. Nobody can. But I can tell you this, the next time somebody tells you SpongeBob's timeline is a mess because nobody at Nickelodeon was paying attention, you know that's not the only explanation available. And honestly, it might not even be the most likely one. So, timeline paradox solved? Or at least solved as much as a 26-year-old cartoon about a sponge is ever going to let us solve anything. Now, before you go, if today was about proving this show is a lot more connected than it lets on, our last video went the complete opposite direction. We went through every single season, 1 through 17, and picked out the worst episode each one had to offer. Sometimes an episode's just bad, and that's the whole theory.
Imagine waking up from the trippiest dream of your life, only to realize you never actually left it. This is Squidward in Clarinetland, an episode from Season 7 where Squidward experiences the most bizarre sequence in his life, all because of a clarinet.
What is this place?
I don't appreciate your tone. Pressure.
Except, what if this wasn't just a dream? Something worse. A breakdown, a system crash, a quiet scream, trapped inside a velvet-lined cage. When I first watched it as a kid, this episode felt so weird, so unique, and confusing. Was Squidward just having a fever dream? How was he having the weird dream in the first place? And why does this strange creature, of all things, appear in Clarinetland? So many questions, and over the years, fans have tried to make sense of it. But now, I've finally put the pieces together. But before we dive into Clarinetland, we need to understand what actually happened. So the episode opens with Squidward going off to work by bike. Squidward is happy, like suspiciously happy. He gets blasted in the face with gravel and he calls it a fine day.
What a day.
That's our first red flag. SpongeBob straight up crushes him with the door, and Squidward just giggles. Even that doesn't break him. Everyone knows that Squidward should be snapping left, right, and center at this point. Something foul is at play here.
Good morning, sir. Welcome to the Krusty Krab.
Who is this man and what did he do with the real Squidward? And finally, Mr. Krabs hits him with the question that we're all thinking.
Did you get an order of fancy decorative soaps in the mail or something?
Yeah, soaps. Totally not a weird euphemism for, did you take something before your shift today, Squidward? Turns out, the real toxin in his head isn't soap, it's hope. Squidward is just really excited to perform at the clarinet recital after work. And now I want you to pay attention very closely to this happiness thing with Squidward, because it plays a critical role in this story. Squiddy is actually holding on really well here. I'm actually impressed. That's it. That's the Squidward we all know. He loses it, starts snapping at everybody. Squidward then demands better working conditions and pulls out what might be the most unrealistic thing in Bikini Bottom, a labor regulation book.
Bikini Bottom labor regulations?
Where did he get this? Who gave Squidward the HR handbook? And is there a union in Bikini Bottom? Where were you in Can You Spare a Dime? I need answers. So Mr. Krabs, in peak cost-cutting fashion, gives him this locker, which contains dust, mold, and an actual skeleton, supposedly named Sterling from corporate. I don't know. At this point, Krabs could reveal that he actually hides bodies in the walls. I'm not surprised. Oh, they have to share this horror locker, by the way. Squidward stores his prized clarinet. Meanwhile, SpongeBob stores a used toothbrush. Honestly, that's the real violation here. Then things get weird. Because not only does SpongeBob clean up the locker and install Velvet, he actually turns the locker into an actual archival vault. It makes zero spatial sense, but this is where it starts to feel intentional. SpongeBob is messing with them. Like, why would you need more than 2,000 lockers anyway? He kept moving Squidward's clarinet from one locker to another, making it harder to find. Squidward, in search of his precious clarinet, starts to wander inside the vault. He starts hearing SpongeBob laughs, seeing a silhouette of Sponge. Then boom, he finds a hole. Crawls in like Alice through the rabbit hole and enters Clarinet Land. And yeah, this is where things go off the deep end. Things start to get trippy from this part. It doesn't feel like a dream anymore, it feels more like a meltdown. There are clarinets everywhere, tall, big, and erecting to the sky. None of this is explained, which is fine. This is SpongeBob, we've seen weirder, right? Except SpongeBob is different too. He's not goofy here. He's creepy. He's laughing from the shadows, always just out of reach, like he knows something we don't. And then, because why not, he meets a massive, bald eagle head. No explanation, no setup, the eagle just exists. And he's guarding a forest of clarinets?
I'm trying to find my clarinet.
A clarinet is not owned.
This line, I don't know what it means yet, but it sounds important. At first, I thought it was nonsense, like something you hear before a cult meeting. But nah, this line means something personal to Squidward. Squiddy then gets eaten. And the adventure continues inside the bald eagle's belly. This isn't Clarinet Land anymore, it's just something else. This is the moment I realized the episode is going somewhere I did not sign up for. He lands in a mirror room where he gets jump scared by himself. Multiple Squidwards playing clarinet badly, assaulting his ears. Not funny, just unsettling. Then, somehow, Squidward ends up inside a pinball machine with Patrick playing it like he does this every Tuesday.
I win! Hey, what are you doing here?
Squidward asks why Patrick is huge.
And how did you get so big?
Patrick says,
Must be all the pressure.
"What does that even mean?" Patrick also said it like a threat, too. Then, a sentient vacuum shows up and explodes Squidward into space, chasing SpongeBob. We're so far past logic, it's embarrassing to even ask for it back. But then Squidward wakes up, already trapped inside the tiny locker, looking like he's aged 20 years in 20 minutes. Turns out SpongeBob holds the clarinet this entire time.
Oh, you mean this?
As a friendly, kind gesture. Squidward gets angry, throws SpongeBob into the locker, chains it, and sends it far, far away. So nobody could bother him at the recital.
You wouldn't believe what I had to go through to get...
Hi, Squidward.
How? How is he there? You know what? Never mind. This episode leaves us with so many unexplained details. Why the clarinet forest? Why the eagle? Why does the logic break harder the longer it goes? But in order to make sense of this episode, we have to understand Squidward's dream. And after replaying this episode several times, I found out what actually might be the trigger to Squidward's dream. It's subtle, but right before everything collapses, Squidward inhales a thick cloud of locker dust. From here on, nothing feels real. This moment, it's the spark, the point where reality bends and transforms into something else. So it's clear that this dust did something to him. The scene where SpongeBob shows a massive vault archive actually hits hard. The locker starts as a small space, but SpongeBob turns it into an endless archive. Rows and rows of drawers, catalogs, redirections. This could symbolize Squidward's burnout, overwork. It's a parody of bureaucracy, where even your dreams become data to misplace. Squidward has to follow index cards just to find the thing he already put in there. It's the feeling of drowning in a system built to waste your time.
Another note.
But what about Clarinetland itself? Why does Squidward fall into a world made entirely of clarinets? Because at this point, his entire mind is clarinet. He's consumed by the recital. It's all he can think about. His stress, his fear, and his identity, all wrapped up around that one obsession. So the Clarinetland isn't just random, it's constructed from fixation. It's a dream made of pressure. But what does it have to do with tall, stoic, full of wisdom bald eagle? It's a symbol of the United States, sure, but not the proud, noble one from the history books. This version is cold, stiff, and bureaucratic. He's not here to inspire, he's here to block the way, a gatekeeper.
I am the keeper of the horned forest.
A living metaphor for the system, the kind that values structure over people. He stands between Squidward and his dream. When the eagle says a clarinet is not owned, it's not just some cryptic cult. The eagle is actually saying your passion doesn't belong to you anymore. Your dream is no longer yours. It belongs to deadlines, to debt, to media expectations. You can work, you can strive, you can love something deeply, but in a system that doesn't care, it will still swallow you. And that's exactly what happens. Squidward tries to reason with it. He begs to keep hold of his dream, and the system swallows him whole. No sympathy, no ceremony, just consumption. After more chasing, more chaos, Squidward enters the worst room of all, the one with no outside threat, just mirrors and himself. They shove clarinets in their mouths, they play out of tune notes, overwhelming him. This is the voice in his head, the doubt, the insecurity, the part of him that thinks he's great, but fears he's not. It's just brutal. Then he met Titan Patrick. He says, "Must be all the pressure," which sounds like a joke until it isn't. Because Patrick isn't just big. He's massive in the way pressure feels when you're small, tired, and one bad bounce away from breaking. And what's he doing? Playing a game. Squidward's game. His life turned into bouncing chaos. Loud, violent, unfair. And Patrick's just mashing buttons without any care. That's how shaking the pressure feels when no one's in control. And as if it's all been leading to this, the vacuum shows up. No grand villain speech, no way out. This is the collapse, the moment when the system, or the mind, just gives out. And what comes next? Is nothing. After the explosion, he's drifting in space, alone, weightless, still chasing his clarinet, still chasing purpose, even after everything has collapsed. Even in the void, he's clinging to it. Because when everything falls apart, the last thing to leave is your dream. And then he wakes up. But it doesn't feel like waking up. It feels like crashing. SpongeBob acts like nothing happened. But Squidward? He's rattled, destroyed. He remembers everything. He can't even speak, just mutters gibberish. This wasn't just a random dream in the workplace. It's everything inside Squidward's head, magnified and visualized into a horror. But the episode still doesn't make sense. What did the dust really do? Was it magical? Was it symbolic? Why was Squidward spiraling today of all days? What was the episode really trying to say? So I started rewatching. Not just this episode, all of them. And that's when it blew my mind. There's a pattern. A long, subtle buildup leading to this exact moment. And if I'm right, this could rewrite how we see this episode. And honestly, it might just break your brain. Now, let's be honest. Squidward didn't just snap because of some moldy locker dust. He snapped because he was already hanging by a thread. Remember the first red flag? That fake, forced happiness at the start of the episode? Yes, he says it's because of the clarinet recital. But think about it. Why bother keeping up a good mood at all? That's not like him. And get this, if you've watched Band Geeks or Squilliam Returns, you already know Squidward crumbles under pressure. In Band Geeks, Squidward completely breaks down while preparing for his big moment. He's snappy, disorganized, overwhelmed, and visibly anxious, even when SpongeBob and the gang are being cooperative. In Squilliam Returns, He gets flustered and spirals into a full panic trying to impress his rival. My theory is that Squidward is already nervous and panicking a few days before the dream happens. He's so consumed by it, he can't get a proper rest, he can't even eat properly. And the only thing keeping him from cracking is pretending everything's fine. Remember earlier when I said the true toxin in his brain is hope? This is it. He's not acting weird because of some decorative soap. He's mentally exhausted. And this recital? It's all he has left. Now, you wouldn't get a mushroom trip with just dust, but this isn't regular dust. This dust comes from a locker with a dead body and rust. God knows what kind of bacteria or fungus is inside. Even Davy Jones's locker had better ventilation. And that moment when Squidward breathes it in, that's the crack. Reality starts to blur, he starts seeing things. SpongeBob building a full-blown archival project in the kitchen? Come on. The last real thing we see is when SpongeBob changes the locker color into velvet. Because when Squidward wakes up, the velvet is already there. Everything after that, it's in his head. Meanwhile, his real body crawled into the locker like a desperate animal. And finally, after countless nights of no sleep, everything comes out at once. Everything he faced in there was something he already lived with. Work that never ends. Systems who refuse to listen, swallow you. Your dream keeps slipping away from you, and a voice in your head that says you'll never be good enough. The clarinet wasn't just an instrument, it was his hope, a dream of his, something he believes can still save him. That's why he's holding it so dearly. And the more Clarinet Land tried to take it away, the harder he chased it, even when it broke him. But just when he thought he made it, SpongeBob pops out, and that's it. That's the final straw. No matter how hard you try to escape the nonsense, you can't. Because it's built into the world, into the job, into the people around you. That's also why this episode hits harder than most people realize. Because Squidward isn't just a character having a weird dream, he's us. Stuck in a loop, doing only what we're told, pretending we're okay while chasing something that keeps moving, in a world that keeps getting louder, heavier, and harder to understand. And that's the genius of this episode. It plays like a surreal joke, but it's not. It's a message from the writers, a quiet warning dressed in absurdity, a way of saying, hey, you might be next, especially if you live in a place like America, the so-called land of dreams, where anyone can make it as long as they work hard enough. But here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. The system is rigged, built to exhaust you, gatekeep you, keep you just hopeful enough to stay in line, but never free enough to leave it. You can work your fingers to the bone, burn yourself out for the spotlight, and still end up background noise in someone else's episode. Because a dream is not owned. You rent it, and rent's due every day. Even hope has a price tag. But hey, maybe we're already in Clarinet Land. Maybe we've been in it for years. We just haven't noticed the velvet walls yet. Though we still can't explain why SpongeBob somehow ended up inside the clarinet case after being chained and shipped away, it breaks the rules of logic, which means one of two things. Squidward never left the dream, or the dream never left him. So what do you think Clarinet Land really is? A dream? A breakdown? A warning? SpongeBob has always dipped into spooky territory, but sometimes it crosses the line. Not just scary, but something uncanny. One minute, it's SpongeBob and Patrick catching jellyfish, and suddenly the entire town is replaced with clones. Blank-eyed, emotionless, and repeating the same phrase.
Hold the mayonnaise.
Hold the mayonnaise!
That's what Planet of the Jellyfish feels like. But here's the weird part. The episode ends on a question mark. A line that suggests maybe this isn't the real end. So I went back, rewatched the entire thing frame by frame, trying to make sense of every single detail in this episode. And what I found changes the way this episode, and maybe the show, is supposed to be understood. Because I think Planet of the Jellyfish isn't just a scary episode, it might be the biggest threat SpongeBob's world has ever faced. All because jellyfishing. The episode opens up with a mundane afternoon at the jellyfish fields. SpongeBob's chasing jellyfish and Patrick's failing to catch any. Nothing out of the ordinary, until the camera lingers. In the background, there's an evil-looking cave, and something's watching. We don't get a name, just a shape, an eerie alien sound.
Is it me, or does Jellyfish Field seem different today?
A huge, green, slimy alien with hollow black eyes. It catches one of the regular jellyfish and eats it. Turns out, it doesn't just eat it, it transforms it. Spits it back out as something else. A copy of jellyfish that looks the same, except it has black eyes, blank expression, and it's silent. Then it starts cloning more. So much that it's enough to attack all of Bikini Bottom. Meanwhile, Patrick falls asleep on a rock, and that's when it happens. One of the clones engulfs him, wraps around his body, and from that creates a clone of Patrick. Same voice, same face, but another with blank black eyes. This is Jellian Patrick. And this is where the episode shifts its tone into terror. The real Patrick is taken away. Jellian Patrick picks up a net and acts like nothing's happened. SpongeBob doesn't notice. He even compliments Patrick for catching jellyfish. But Jellian Patrick has an idea. Let's give one jellyfish to all our friends. This is the invasion plan. One person at a time, replaced while they're sleeping. That night, they drop off a jellyfish at Squidward's house. We see it happen again. Jelly goes in, clones come out. The real Squidward is gone, and in his place, something cold, green, and hollow.
There will be plenty of biting this night. Rah!
But SpongeBob doesn't see it yet. He goes to bed, unaware there's now a Jellian right beside him. And here's a moment worth paying attention to. Jellian tries to capture him in his sleep, but SpongeBob's insomnia saves him. He goes downstairs and distracts the clone by accident, tossing popcorn in its mouth, which chokes it. This moment might seem funny, but it tells us something crucial. The Jellians are biological. They can choke. They're not invincible superpower beings. SpongeBob cages the next creature the next morning like it's a weird pet, not realizing it already replaced his neighbors. He heads off to work, and behind him, the Jellian escapes and engulfs Gary. But what it spits out isn't just a copy of Gary, it's Gary fused with the houseplant next to him. It's subtle, but this is where the rules change. The clones are also capable of copying household items, not just individuals. Cut to the Krusty Krab. It's packed, there's a line of customers, but every customer says the same thing. One Krabby Patty, hold the mayonnaise. Except one guy. One normal-looking fish orders a patty with extra mayo, and suddenly, everyone turns on it. They hiss, pointing at him, and in that moment we realize what the clones are really doing. They're staying away from mayonnaise. For whatever reason we don't know yet. Mr. Krabs, or what we think is him, said that they're running out of mayonnaise, then offers the guy a free jellyfish hat as a compliment. It latches onto his head, and he becomes one of them. Another replacement, all in plain sight. And SpongeBob? He's just now starting to feel that something is off. He was sure they just got a shipment of mayo. He goes to the freezer looking for mayo and finds it fully stocked, which means Mr. Krabs lied, which means Mr. Krabs isn't Mr. Krabs. But then SpongeBob sees something else, through a peephole hidden behind the mayo crates. It's everyone, his co-workers, some random guy, and his spatula, all cocooned in green slime. The same jellyfish overlord from the cave is also standing there, commanding an army. That's the moment it clicks. This isn't just a few clones, this is an invasion, and most of the town has already been taken. He runs, panics, tries to act normal, but everywhere he turns, another clone is waiting, smiling, offering a Jellian, telling him to get some sleep. SpongeBob is running out seeking anyone that hasn't turned into a clone, and just before he's caught, Sandy grabs him and pulls him into her tree dome. At first, she thinks he's a clone too, but she tickles him and SpongeBob's laugh gives him away.
You're SpongeBob, all right.
They piece it together. Mayonnaise is the key. So they disguise themselves with fake Jellian eyes and accents to blend in with the clones.
I hate mayonnaise.
I hate mayonnaise and mustard.
They both manage to sneak back into the Krusty Krab, but the disguise slips, and now the clones know. In a moment of panic, SpongeBob grabs a mayo sprayer from the condiment island and fights them off. The moment the Jellian Krabs got sprayed by mayonnaise, he instantly dissolved and popped the cocoon in the freezer. The real Krabs is freed. So SpongeBob continues to fight by shooting every single one of them. One by one, the Bikini Bottomites are freed. But there's still one left, the Overlord, hiding in the freezer. SpongeBob tries to shoot it, but the mayonnaise is starting to harden. He tries to launch a frozen mayo block, but nothing happens. But Sandy quickly turns up the heat, the mayo melts, and finally, it destroys him. The Overlord turns into goo and floods the freezer. It's over. The town is saved, or so it seems. Because in the final scene, Mr. Krabs is selling the leftover green goo as relish patties, and Patrick orders one. SpongeBob and Squidward shoot him a look. The screen fades to black, and the final title card appears. So that was Planet of the Jellyfish. And yeah, on the surface, it's one of the weirder SpongeBob plots. Alien jellyfish clones, mayonnaise warfare, a secret hive under the Krusty Krab. But the more you watch it, the more it stops feeling random and starts feeling deliberate, like something's hidden underneath the relish. Because there are patterns here, and rules, and a trail that goes deeper than just one episode. Why do the jellyfish clone people? Why do they hate mayonnaise? And why is Patrick still acting strange after it's all over? I rewatched everything, cross-referenced every jellyfish appearance, checked every episode that might have picked up the thread, and what I found changes how you see the entire show. To make sense of all this, I've broken the mystery down into 3 key theories, and as we go through them one by one, the real story behind Planet of the Jellyfish starts to come into focus. So let's go back to the end. SpongeBob defeats the aliens, the Overlord melts, Bikini Bottom is safe again, except it's not. Because if you look closer, the episode doesn't wrap up with a celebration. There's no cleanup, no recovery, no therapy session for the town that was just secretly replaced by clones. Instead, Mr. Krabs bottles up the leftover alien goo and sells it for food, for $4 extra. They name it Freaky Clone Jelly Relish, the same goo that was literally cloning people hours earlier. Now it's just another condiment. And here's where it gets weird. No one questions it. Not SpongeBob, not the townspeople who just got their bodies back, not even Sandy, the all-knowing scientist of Bikini Bottom. Everyone just moves on, like it didn't happen. But maybe they didn't forget. Maybe they accepted it. And that's the first real clue. Because think about the logic. If you were an alien species trying to conquer a new planet, would you use brute force? Or would you use taste? You let the people take it willingly. You let yourself be consumed. Was it their plan all along? The invasion could just be a show, something dramatic and scary to hide the real terror, something that ends with goo on the floor, right where Mr. Krabs could scoop it up and get it into the food chain. And maybe someone helped make that happen. Mr. Krabs saw a product, but what about Sandy? The one who figures out their weakness and then never brings it up again. Not once. What if she knew it wasn't over? And maybe that's the point. The aliens didn't lose, they just changed form. And the moment that relish hit the grill, the real invasion began. So if the invasion was never meant to be won, if the goal was to be consumed, normalized, loved, then the question is, did it work? Let's track what happens after the episode. At the very end of the episode, there's one line that sticks. Patrick, the first person to get cloned, walks up to the counter and says,
I'll have 1 relish patty. Hold them in.
It's weird and funny on paper, until you remember something from an older episode, Hocus Pocus, Season 4. Patrick literally begs SpongeBob to turn him into a jar of mayonnaise so he can eat himself.
I'm still hungry. Will you turn me into a jar of mayonnaise so I can eat myself?
Mayonnaise is one of his favorite things, so why suddenly avoid it? Even SpongeBob and Squidward stare at him like something's off. Like they're not sure he's the real Patrick anymore. But it doesn't stop there. In later episodes, other characters start showing the same aversion. Sandy says she hates mayonnaise. Gary, even Patchy, reacts like it's gross or dangerous. And this isn't just a gag, it becomes a pattern. You could call it a gag, or you could see it as what it really is. Their body rejected it, triggered by something inside them, because at the same time, jellyfish culture explodes. We go from niche jellyfish fandoms in early seasons to full-blown conventions. Everyone was wearing jellyfish hats, talking about how cool jellyfish is, cosplaying it. The energy's different, it feels like a cult. And maybe it's all just a coincidence. A weird mix of callbacks and visual gags. Or maybe the goo did what it was designed to do. The goo entered the food, changed their behavior, made them reject mayo, the only thing that could destroy it. And the terrifying part? No one notices or cares, because the invasion worked. And if all that sounds like a stretch, then we need to talk about one last detail. The one thing that actually hurts these aliens. Let's move on. The Jellians aren't cartoon villains. They're intelligent creatures. They study the town, take over its leaders, run the Krusty Krab with terrifying efficiency. But there's one thing they can't touch. Mayonnaise. We see it multiple times. The moment a clone touches it, they melt. But here's the real question. Why mayo? Because mayonnaise isn't just oil and egg, it also contains vinegar. And vinegar is one of the only substances that breaks down jellyfish venom without causing more stings. It's a real-world remedy for jellyfish injuries. So, if these aliens evolved from jellyfish, or still share the same base biology, then vinegar is a natural enemy. Not just irritating, it's a lethal instrument. Wait, does Patrick know all along?
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
It is an instrument of defense, after all. Is it?
Horseradish is not an instrument either.
Does horseradish work for the aliens too? Jokes aside, combining that with what we've seen, maybe it's not a coincidence after all. Because that's how viruses survive. They don't just attack the outside, they change behavior from inside. They hijack instincts, rewire cravings, make you allergic to the one thing that could wipe them out again. So what looks like just a town moving on might actually be an entire population that's already infected, controlled quietly, from the inside out. And once you understand that, the ending of the episode doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like the first successful test run, because there's still more to all of this. Which brings us to the final, creepiest piece of the puzzle. Bikini Bottom thinks they've won. They spray the invaders, melt the clones, destroy the Overlord. But what if that's what the Jellians wanted? What if the whole invasion, the horror, the chaos, the defeat, was part of a larger plan? Think about it. They shed their old form and evolved into something new, a product. Now they're inside everyone, studying, sinking, avoiding vinegar, building resistance. Because the people of Bikini Bottom don't fight back. They paid $4 extra to help it spread. And here's the scary part. Maybe this was phase 1, a failed version on purpose. Because if this goo can influence instincts, hijack preferences, rewrite biology, then what happens when it comes back? Stronger, smarter Jellians, immune to mayonnaise. Next time, there won't be a weapon. There won't be a resistance. Because by then, Bikini Bottom won't see them as invaders. They'll see them as normal. That was their plan. And what scares me most is the thought that someone might have known. Maybe Mr. Krabs sold the goods because it made money. That's no surprise. He sells SpongeBob's soul for 62 cents. I bet he would sell the whole of Bikini Bottom for a few bucks. But Sandy? She helped stop the invasion. She knew the risk, and yet she says nothing, ever again. Why? Does she have a plan? Or that she thought Bikini Bottom already lost? So yeah, maybe Planet of the Jellyfish didn't end with a victory. Maybe it ended with the start of something far more terrifying. They reprogrammed the town, rewired how it thinks, eats, behaves, and they did it without brute force. Just a little relish and a little marketing. That's what makes this so terrifying. Because if Bikini Bottom can be rewritten that easily, what else in this world isn't real anymore? What other stories do we think we understand that have already been hijacked? Because there's one character who's been quietly breaking down for years. Someone who's been resisting change. Bitter, disconnected, trying to hold on to something real. And when you trace it all the way back, you realize it's not random. We mapped every known relative, and what we found explains everything. For years, a strange and oddly persistent theory has floated around the internet. Was SpongeBob SquarePants adopted? And the first time you hear it, it sounds crazy absurd. Like one of those creepy fan theories cooked up at 3 a.m. by someone who's clearly spent way too much time thinking about SpongeBob. Like me, for example. But then you look at his parents, and the confusion starts to make sense. Harold and Margaret SquarePants look nothing like him. They're brown, round, and, well, not very square. So I kinda get why people start raising questions. But unlike Mr. Krabs' family, where half the members are some urban legend, SpongeBob's relatives actually show up on the show. A lot of them, too. We've seen his grandparents, his cousins, even his great-great ancestors. So what's the big clue that makes fans keep insisting that there's something wrong with SpongeBob's family when the show has already given us the answers? I just can't get this curiosity out of my head. So I'm going to trace this theory from every clue we could find and try to figure out what this adoption mystery actually says about SpongeBob, and maybe even about us. Because if there's one thing I've learned from this channel, it's that the strangest questions often hide the most human truths. Every mystery starts with something small, a tiny detail that's often overlooked. And for SpongeBob's adoption theory, that detail is his parents. Old, brown, round little sea sponges living in a coral home, wearing matching outfits, and sounding like every sweet elderly couple you've ever met. They're also kind, supportive, and unmistakably cookie-shaped. Now, put them next to SpongeBob and suddenly things don't quite line up. He's yellow, he's square, well, he looks more like a kitchen sponge. Now it's like looking at a bright piece of cheese standing next to 2 gingerbread cookies. Originally, that's the first big red flag that made fans say, they don't look alike, so maybe he's not theirs? I just realized that argument is something you'd expect from the Krabby Chronicle. Something like a big news headline like, local sponge not related to cookie parents. It's funny to think about. I don't know why. Jokes aside, their visual differences definitely look strange on paper. Even as a kid, I remember thinking SpongeBob's parents were just old chocolate cookies who got onto the wrong show. But things actually start to make sense when you pull back and look at the bigger picture, SpongeBob's entire family tree. Because as it turns out, SpongeBob's grandparents are 2 different kinds of sponges. On his father's side, there's Grandma Squarepants, the warm, brown, round sponge who loves to spoil SpongeBob. You've definitely seen her, always offering him cookies, tea, and hugs every now and then. But then there's her late husband, Grandpa Squarepants.
If we were meant to fly, hey, I'm not your grandfather.
A bright yellow, square-shaped sponge. Basically the same look as SpongeBob, just older. So right away, we already see 2 completely different sponge types under the same roof. Now, there's also another funny thing I used to believe. Maybe Harold and Margaret are just old kitchen sponges that got left underwater too long? You know how the bright yellow sponge you use at home turns brown and floppy after a few weeks? Yeah, that was my childhood logic. But then you remember Grandpa Squarepants existed, and he's also old, yet still perfectly yellow and square. Which means no, this isn't about aging. There are just 2 different species of sea sponge in this universe, brown and round, yellow and square. And they all exist within the same family. It's just diversity. Even Harold's sibling is a perfect example of this. One brother named Sherm Squarepants, a yellow square sponge capable of shoving an entire watermelon up his nose. Sherm also has a son, Stanley Squarepants, who is basically SpongeBob's taller, identical twin, except slightly less competent. And then there's another brother, Captain Blue, the hearing-impaired Squarepants, father of cousin Blackjack from the episode Blackjack in Season 5. Both of them are brown and round like Harold and Margaret. And that's just within SpongeBob's direct relatives. If you zoom out to his ancestors, there's SpongeBuck from the Wild West, or Sponge Gar from prehistoric Bikini Bottom. They all look exactly like SpongeBob. So if SpongeBob's shape and color are supposedly what make him different, that difference clearly runs in the family. So, case closed, right? Well, no, obviously not, because if there's one rule with fan theories, it's this. When logic doesn't work, the imagination goes wild. And that's exactly what happens next. When people realize the cookie parents argument doesn't hold up, the theory starts evolving in scale, and not in a way you would expect. You see, one of the biggest smoking guns that completely debunked this whole adoption theory came from one scene, one clip, one tiny weird flashback about SpongeBob in his mother's womb. You know the one from Truth or Square. It shows baby SpongeBob floating peacefully inside his mom's womb, happily eating a Krabby Patty before he's even born. At first, it looks adorable, but then your brain catches up. Wait a minute, sponges don't have wombs. And suddenly, that cute scene becomes one of the most confusing clues. Real sponges don't give birth like mammals. They reproduce by releasing larvae into the water that attach to coral or rocks. Some species do it by budding. So this scene, it's completely impossible in nature. Even if we did pretend the SquarePants family somehow worked like mammals, it still wouldn't make sense for him to remember a day before he was even born, let alone his first fast food meal. In fact, that impossibility might actually be the point of the scene. It's part of a storytelling montage. SpongeBob reminiscing about his past, jumping through exaggerated cartoonish memories. It's more of a sentimental and imaginative segment. You know, he's imagining what it might have been like. Which, if you know SpongeBob, makes perfect sense. This is the guy who once turned a cardboard box into a space simulator just by pretending hard enough.
Imagination.
He's built entire worlds out of thin air, or technically thin water. So of course, he'd imagine his own birth with perfect lighting and a Krabby Patty. But even here, some people still try to push it further. If it's imagination, then maybe his memories were implanted. Maybe he's some kind of clone. And at that point, you just have to stop and breathe. If anything, the womb scene doesn't disprove his connection to his parents, it makes the adoption theory even more absurd. What, are we gonna say SpongeBob's imagination is so powerful he literally rewrites his own origin story just to make it more emotional? So we set that aside and let the theory escalate again. Since the family tree checks out and the womb scene doesn't break it, people start reaching further. Not only that, they also managed to tie it in with another existing theory. One of the oldest and still most popular is the idea that SpongeBob isn't a sea sponge at all. Instead, he's a kitchen sponge, a man-made cleaning product that somehow fell off a ship, sank to the ocean floor, and came to life. In other words, the ocean's first living piece of pollution, a walking, talking, square-shaped miracle of human trash. And to be fair, that does sound almost believable in SpongeBob logic. The show itself loves to make jokes about it. This is a world where a crab runs a fast food restaurant, a squirrel lives underwater in a dome, so a kitchen sponge coming to life? Sure, why not? So by that reasoning, do Harold and Margaret just adopt SpongeBob out of pity? They can't just leave a stranded kitchen sponge, so they take it home? But even that theory collapses the second you remember the show actually proves SpongeBob is a real sea sponge over and over again. He could regenerate his body. He could split into clones. He can even separate his limbs and have them function independently. SpongeBob is a pure sea porifera, all right. Real sponges, the kind that live on coral reefs, can do that too. They don't have brains or organs or blood. They're basically colonies of cells that rebuild themselves constantly. Cut one in half and you don't kill it, you just make two sponges. It's like living Play-Doh. But of course some don't stop there. The theories get way more absurd. Because if we see SpongeBob's powers, his speed, his durability, the way he survives explosions, it's not normal at all. Then maybe he's a mutation. Maybe he's the result of radiation, one of the many victims of Bikini Atoll. But you've probably heard this one. The idea that Bikini Bottom sits directly below the real-world nuclear test site, and that all the talking sea creatures are the result of leftover radiation from those bombs. Until you remember, everyone in this show can survive explosions. Even a single-celled plankton can survive multiple explosions throughout the show. That's just Bikini Bottom physics. And so if Bikini Atoll is tied to this theory, it would just make all of them mutants, right? Either way, SpongeBob isn't special. If anything, this only proves how normal he actually is compared to everyone else. And still, that doesn't stop people from trying to explain the unexplainable. Because when science starts breaking apart, someone always tries to fix it with more science. So they bring out the big guns, genetics. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Because, sure, we've seen that SpongeBob's family has both brown round and yellow square sponges. But the catch is that every parent is matched with their kids. Uncle Sherm and Stanley, square and yellow. Uncle Blue and Blackjack, round and brown. Then people ask, both Harold and Margaret are brown round types of sponges. How did two circles make a square? That's just impossible. And I mean, fair question. You don't usually see geometry get that aggressive in genetics. But remember those Punnett squares you probably doodled on your biology homework? that's where this fits in. Imagine Harold and Margaret each have two traits, color and shape. Brown and round are the dominant ones, yellow and square are recessive. And if both parents quietly carry those recessive genes hidden behind their cookie-colored exterior, there's a 1 in 16 chance their kid ends up square and yellow. Statistically rare, yes, but still possible. So after all that talk about nuclear fallout and sentient kitchen sponges, it turns out the real answer might just be a Punnett square. Which, if you think about it, is kind of hilarious. The mystery fans have been chasing for years can literally be solved by the same worksheet you used to figure out why your eyes are blue. In fact, SpongeBob shares the exact same eye features as Margaret. So no, two random circles don't make squares, but two round sponges carrying the right traits could absolutely make a square one. Ironically, after 4 wild detours, the cookie parents, the imaginary womb, the pollution theory, even Bikini Atoll, every clue we found points to the same boring conclusion. Nothing's wrong, everything's normal. Which leaves us with one final question to answer. If there's no secret and no conspiracy, then why does this theory exist at all? Maybe the reason this theory exists in the first place isn't because SpongeBob is shaped differently from his parents, but because his behavior is completely different from his parents. Like I said before, Harold and Margaret are a polite and sweet elderly couple, and so their son is basically a lunatic compared to them. This has also been a running theme with the show. We asked why Eugene Krabs has a whale for a daughter. That made Pearl's theory I covered some time ago. Why is Squidward the grumpy one while his parents are a complete joker and a badass? Also a topic I've talked about. We're just so used to asking these kinds of questions. Layer that with the fact we also live in a time where every story feels like it needs a tragic backstory. Every hero has trauma, every cartoon needs a dark twist, and every smile is treated like it's hiding something. So when we see a character who is genuinely content, who loves his parents, his job, and his life, we assume it has to be fake. There must be something darker underneath. But truth be told, SpongeBob SquarePants isn't adopted. He isn't a clone or a lab experiment or a piece of radioactive dish sponge that fell from a ship. He's exactly what the show tells us he is, a happy, square little sea sponge with a loving family. That's it. No twist, no hidden tragedy waiting behind the pineapple door. And in its own quiet way, that's rarer than any secret adoption reveal could ever be. So in the end, SpongeBob's adoption theory doesn't hide any secret parents or lost origins. It never did. Instead, it's about us, about how we keep looking for sadness in places where it doesn't belong. SpongeBob's family isn't broken. He's not an experiment. He's just unapologetically content with his life. And in a world that thrives on chaos, irony, and cynicism, that kind of pure joy almost feels unnatural. But what if it really is unnatural? What if SpongeBob's unstoppable cheerfulness, the laughter, the optimism, the endless positivity, isn't a family trait, but a defense mechanism? What if his happiness is the mask that keeps everyone else, and maybe even himself, from realizing there's something darker underneath? Because maybe the real mystery isn't whether SpongeBob was adopted, it's how far he's willing to go to keep the world smiling with him. People tend to misunderstand this episode. You know, the one with Squidward and SpongeBob turning into snails. As kids, some of us ran from the TV as soon as we saw the title alone. Others sat through it and walked away asking, what was that even about? I myself used to file it under the weird for the sake of weird category. But recently, I went back and watched every single scene, and the longer I sat with it, the more it became clear. The choices aren't accidents. There's a very specific reason this episode wants you to feel that way. One that's not really easy to catch, especially for kids. But don't worry, I solved it for you, and I'll gladly share. We'll turn this horrifying body horror episode into something that makes sense. And to do that, we'll have a look back from the beginning, back to the first bad decision that set everything in motion. The episode opens up with a warm interaction between SpongeBob and Gary. Gary's on the wheel doing his little cardio. SpongeBob calls him, scoops him up, then proceeds to play fetch with Gary. They also hug each other.
I love you, Gary.
Only the wholesome stuff. Suddenly, Patrick bursts in with the jellyfishing net, saying there's a convention in Ukulele Bottom. But SpongeBob hesitates at first because he can't just leave Gary alone for the whole weekend. So he asked Squidward, who shows up to complain about underwear on his lawn. Of course, Squidward doesn't want to, at least until he hears the words,
I guess we can't go away this weekend after all, Patrick.
gone all weekend, and suddenly he's the world's most enthusiastic pet sitter. Notice how fast he accepts once he realizes the neighborhood will be quiet? He never cared about Gary in the first place. SpongeBob then runs through the instructions anyway, walking schedule, the labeled cans, and Squidward nods like he's listening. He's not. After 3 days worth of sun tanning, Squidward, who's lobster red, just remembers the one thing he was supposed to care for. So he panics and runs inside, but it's too late. Gary's already shriveled and wheezing on the floor. He tries to dump every can into the bowl, but Gary clearly couldn't eat any. Then, when he hears SpongeBob at the door, Squidward shoves the food into his own mouth just to hide the evidence. My guy would rather choke than confess. SpongeBob walks in, sees Gary, and everything goes cold.
Gary!
We cut to the vet rolling up in a shell-shaped van. The doctor takes one look and says,
This is definitely a snail.
Then he pulls out a pastel seashell syringe and says Gary needs a shot of snail plasma, and hands the needle to SpongeBob. Because apparently he won't do it, says he's too squeamish. Clock that, a well-educated vet refuses to do his job and passes the risk to a kid. This bad decision would later set the horror tone through the roof. Turns out, SpongeBob can't do it either. He's squeamish too. So Squidward tries to do it, but the moment he does it, SpongeBob yanks Gary away. Again and again and again, until Squidward slips and drives the needle straight into SpongeBob's nose. But they both shrug it off with that line that always jinxes every horror movie.
Trust me, SpongeBob. Nothing's gonna happen to you. You're fine.
A beat later, Gary drinks some water, and then he's totally okay, which makes that handoff feel even worse. The cure was the easiest thing in the room, and the plasma hit the one person that didn't need it. Night hits, SpongeBob feeds Gary, and without thinking, eats the entire bowl himself. He burps, meows, and laughs it off. Said, I worry too much. But then his footsteps go heavy. The camera follows him into the bathroom, he stares into the mirror and tries to talk himself down. He keeps insisting he's fine because Squidward said he would be. That's the part that always gets me. He trusts the wrong sentence longer than he trusts his own body. This is when the show stops cracking jokes and starts slipping in the horror.
I take it back, Gary. Something is wrong with me.
And what follows this body horror montage is an even more disturbing classic horror trope. SpongeBob comes to Squidward's place and meows. Squidward opens the door, sees him, and gets terrified. He boards the door, boards the window, hides in the closet, then finally says the truth out loud.
None of this would be happening if I'd only fed that snail.
There it is, the confession the episode's been building toward. But SpongeBob just keeps coming. It's the nicest, scariest thing he's ever done. Squidward's house turns upside down from the panic, and to top it off, the snail plasma flies and tags Squidward too. Now it's SpongeBob, Squidward, and Gary on a fence, meowing a sea shanty into the night as a pack. It's funny again, but not the same kind of funny. That ending scene in particular feels like the show just toggled into a different genre for a minute. I still remember that ending vividly even years after I watched it. It's just weird. In fact, I'm not the only one who feels that way. This episode still gets a mixed response to this day. Some said it scared the hell out of them as kids, especially the bathroom transformation scene. Some say it's a terrible episode because of the weird theme. Some even go as far as saying this was the only bad episode from season 1. But for all the slime and the screaming, this episode isn't weird without meaning. In fact, this episode was built to feel wrong on purpose. Because this episode was intentionally made with a very specific idea in mind. One that most kids would never catch, but now we do. That last frame you're watching, the moon, the fence, the 3 silhouettes, was a clear signal. This episode wasn't structured like a normal SpongeBob. It was built following the structure of a monster movie. And not the loosely inspired or kinda similar. The title basically tells on itself. I Was a Teenage Gary is a straight love letter to I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Now the movie itself is pretty much an old school American science fiction horror. Basically, in the old film, a troublesome kid goes to a doctor for help with his anger issues. The doctor says, "Trust me," pulls out a serum, and turns him into something he can't control, a werewolf. The triggers are small. Bells, phone rings, but once the change starts, he's gone. People get scared, someone gets hurt, and by the time the town figures out what's really wrong, it's already too late. That's the blueprint the episode follows. A kid in trouble, adults who fail their job, and a cure that becomes the curse. Now, jump back to Bikini Bottom with that in your head. The main plot starts with Gary getting neglected by Squidward, and SpongeBob partially for trusting the wrong person. Then a professional rolls up in a themed van, diagnoses the problem, and refuses to do the one thing that would fix it. He hands the risk to somebody who doesn't know what he's doing, and worse, the shot goes into the wrong body. From here on, the jokes fall away immediately, and the bathroom mirror becomes a stage. Eyes shouldn't move like that. Legs shouldn't shrink like that. Language shouldn't break like that. And then, because the show loves a visual punchline, you get the moon and the little pack singing as the closure. By the way, that bathroom transformation scene was taken from the famous morph beats from An American Werewolf in London, which is another movie about werewolves. Another, by the way, I know for a fact that some of you are still wondering, what is snail plasma? How in the world could that thing turn someone into a snail? I did try to look it up on the wiki, and it said that the snail plasma is just basically a slime produced by sea snails used to move about. But if injected into another being other than a snail, they will turn into a snail, albeit only temporarily. So it's just a natural snail slime, the one that Gary produces every day. Then I guess the doctor isn't technically wrong with the diagnosis. Gary is sick because he's dehydrated and needs some hydration to cure it, with plasma or just by drinking water. But then by this logic, it means that anyone could turn into a snail temporarily just by chugging any snail slime? Huh? Anyway, while SpongeBob definitely follows the werewolf movie as a guide, there's a twist that makes the SpongeBob episode feel different from the movie it's quoting. The original story punishes the kid, while the doctor and the ones that bully him get killed in the process. At least they don't suffer the curse of being a werewolf. Meanwhile, Nickelodeon doesn't do that. Gary stays untouched. The curse lands on the people who failed him, the sitter who forgot to take care of him, and even the owner, SpongeBob, who trusted Squidward and the doctor because he wanted to leave. Another difference is that in I Was a Teenage Werewolf, Dr. Brandon is predatory. He crosses the line on purpose. In Bikini Bottom, the vet crosses it out by backing out. He knows what to do and refuses. Different sins, same outcome, the kid pays first. That's why the plot lands harder here. The curse doesn't punish the vulnerable, it bounces back to the adults who let it happen. If that sounds a little more kid-friendly, that's the point. I guess they had to give this episode some morals for the story. They can't just let the real villains go unpunished. Now, this also explains the haunting ending scene, the three of them chilling on the fence and meowing their souls away. It's the show putting on a Halloween mask for one night and trying to scare kids. Because unsurprisingly, this episode and its sister episode, Scaredy Pants, was aired for Halloween specials at the time. And I must say, they nailed the job perfectly. Kids were, in fact, scared by this episode. So if that's the plan, what's the message? Why build a kids episode around a classic movie and a haunting curse? Why make the funniest show on TV feel this wrong? Funny enough, the answer lies in how we reacted to it, and what the episode says about trust, caretaking, and the small mistakes that don't hurt you until they do. Part of why this episode sticks in so many kids' brains is because it breaks the pact we thought SpongeBob had with us. Usually when the world tilts and goes to hell, an adult will come and fix it. Take an example from the episode Hooky. SpongeBob and Patrick are being naughty, Krabs scolds them and teaches them a lesson. In Wormy, when the whole town panics, Sandy catches the butterfly and saves the day. Even in an episode like Ripped Pants, SpongeBob becomes a clown. Suddenly a few random fishes approach him and talk him out of embarrassment. Meanwhile here, every adult fumbles their job. The sitter forgets, the professional refuses, even SpongeBob believes the wrong person for a little too long. It's a chain of tiny choices that add up into a tragedy. And that's the point. The monster is everyone but Gary. Gary never does anything wrong. He gets sick, waits, and suffers in silence the way pets and kids do when the people in charge are sunbathing. I Was a Teenage Gary ironically shows us how easy it is to mess up a kid's environment, just because some adults are unwilling to take responsibility. It also teaches us a much more valuable lesson than neglect. If you remember feeling weirdly ashamed watching this as an adult, that is justified. The episode injects shame into every beat. Squidward would rather choke on a mountain of snail food than say, I forgot. SpongeBob keeps repeating, "I'm fine," because someone told him he would be, even when his body is literally changing in the mirror. How long will we defend a bad decision because admitting it means facing a mess that we made? The funniest line in the whole thing might be the confession no one laughs at.
None of this would be happening if I'd only fed that snail.
Meow.
It's really a genius bit. The only pity from this story is that the doctor glides away untouched. I mean, if that dude was too squeamish to inject a snail with plasma, then he clearly shouldn't even be a veterinarian at all. But that also feels true to life. The person with the real power doesn't always pay. Sometimes the fallout hits the ones who trusted them. So, what do you do with this story as a viewer now? You stop treating I Was a Teenage Gary like a random fever dream, and read it as a Halloween creature feature about caretaking and, frankly, responsibility. Pets, kids, plants, projects. Anything depending on you will drift towards chaos if you just hand it to the wrong person and hope for the best. Neglect doesn't hiss, it doesn't knock, it just accumulates until it looks like a different face in the mirror, and suddenly you're meowing on a fence, wondering how you got there. Early SpongeBob is a different beast, huh? They could be fearless like that, silly on the surface, sharp underneath, and still send you to bed with a feeling you couldn't shake. Bikini Bottom looks like a normal cartoon city at first glance. They've got roads, schools, a hospital, even a mayor cutting ribbons every now and again. But the longer you watch, some things just don't add up. Whenever disaster strikes, whether it's giant worms, swarms of jellyfish, or a weird case of mad snail disease, there's never anyone stepping in to keep order. And yet, we know those institutions exist. There's cops in the city, and the Navy is real. Mr. Krabs himself served in it. Which made me think, if those systems exist but we barely see them, then something fishy is definitely going on here. At first I thought it would just be a fun puzzle, like discovering who's actually in charge of Bikini Bottom. Is it the mayor, King Neptune, Gary the Snail with royal blood? But after 3 days rewatching episodes and pulling every clue I could find, I realized this isn't just a question of who's in charge. There's a much bigger system at work, one that explains why the town runs the way it does. So, when searching for the culprit that's responsible for these problems, naturally the mayor would be the most obvious choice, right? After all, he's the one that runs the city. That's what mayors do. Except, Bikini Bottom has had more mayors than Squidward has failed clarinet recitals. They also feel less like leaders and more like props that the writers just drop in whenever they need someone to hold scissors at a ribbon cutting. The first and most recognizable is the Green Mayor, who pops up as early as Season 3. In Doing Time, he's there to announce the opening of a bridge that isn't even finished, and in the Great Snail Race, he gives a short speech to kick things off. And that's about it. His role is strictly ceremonial. He would also appear later in Season 6 in a non-speaking cameo. Then in Season 7, things change. Episodes like SpongeBob's Last Stand and Sponge Kano introduce a completely different Mr. Mayor, who is a purple fish with dark hair. Unlike the green one, he actually holds public meetings, one about a superhighway, another about a volcanic eruption, and while he doesn't really offer any solutions for the problems, at least it looks like he's trying to do something. But just as suddenly as he appeared, he's gone, which I think is pretty strange. Then the Green Mayor comes back in Season 8 like nothing ever happened. No explanation, no mention of elections, not even a hint that anyone noticed the switch. And then by Season 12, in Plankton's old chum, we meet Miss Mayor, who seems to have replaced the Green Mayor permanently and is still the one in charge today. Why? I don't know. But at least she actually does things once in a while, declaring Chum Day a holiday and even pulling off heroic stunts to save the town. Compared to the others, she's probably the most reliable mayor Bikini Bottom's ever had. Now I can hear you thinking, switching mayors isn't strange, right? Cities have elections every few years. But Bikini Bottom itself never mentions any elections. No campaigns, no votes, not even a single campaign poster. Mayors just appear. Like they spawn in every few seasons and everyone acts like it's normal, which is kinda weird. What's also weird is that sometimes their decisions are downright suspicious, especially the Green Mayor. I mean, why would you open an unfinished bridge? You know that this town is full of lunatics, right? But that was nothing compared to what he does in Porous Pockets. He was seen in the crowds of people that begged SpongeBob for money during his short time as a millionaire. That is the mayor of Bikini Bottom begging for pocket change from a fry cook. And don't forget, these are people that steal every bit of furniture from SpongeBob's house as soon as they discover he's no longer rich. And what makes it worse is that whenever disaster strikes, from Plankton's giant death robots to the Alaskan bullworm, the mayor is nowhere to be seen. They just disappear until the next random event. So when you put it all together, the picture becomes clear. Bikini Bottom's mayors are nothing more than figureheads. They look official, they wear the sash, they cut the ribbon, but when it comes to actual governing, they're useless. And that right there is the first piece of the puzzle. The mayor is only a distraction, which means someone else is actually pulling the strings behind the curtain. And that leaves us with the bigger mystery: who is actually in charge? The answer is definitely not the Bikini Bottom police. Half the time they're chasing the wrong guy, the other half they're beating up parking meters for sport.
That guy had no front license plate, let's get him!
The only thing the cops care about is that he doesn't have a license plate. Meanwhile, the car smashing through the buildings is fine? This petty little stuff could get out of hand sometimes, like party pooper pants.
If you're throwing a party, why weren't we invited?
SpongeBob doesn't invite them to his party, so they arrest him on the spot? However, that's just the petty stuff. If we go all the way back to Season 1 in Hall Monitor, we can see how they handle serious business. 2 officers trolling Patrick on patrol is harmless enough, but watch how the episode resolves in the end. They manage to surround SpongeBob, aka the Maniacs, but the one who actually ends up in cuffs is Mrs. Puff. The police put the responsibility onto the boating instructor and walk away from the actual source of mayhem, the Maniac himself. Now, some of you might be saying that the police are technically right here. And that's true. Later episodes like Oral Report even quote the statute that makes instructors responsible for their students.
Under Penal Code 26-1, quote, the boating instructor is responsible
For any minor delinquent actions under that teacher's care.
But come on, SpongeBob was running wild long after class. The cops didn't want to solve the problem, they just wanted someone easy to blame. And they're also pretty inconsistent with the rules. Remember one time Sandy was arrested for public nudity and someone's in the kitchen with Sandy? Even though the majority of the population is only half dressed all of the time. Plankton is always naked, Squidward never wears pants while being a cashier, Krabs goes naked during the Algae's Always Greener while actively committing a crime, and nobody catches any of them. They just don't care. Meanwhile, the city's most consistent threats operate with near impunity. I mean, Plankton attempts robbery so often, it's basically a weekly event. And yet, he always gets off the hook easily. Krabs is even worse. He commits animal cruelty in Jellyfish Hunter, propaganda in Krabby Chronicle, and illegally dumping grease from the grease trap in Greasy Buffoons. And almost all of it goes unpunished. Which begs the question, is this just bad luck, or is someone actually telling them to act this way? Because if you notice, whenever someone with influence gets involved, suddenly the cops snap back into focus. In Professor Squidward, they finally managed to catch Squidward impersonating Squilliam. But if you look closely, it was Squilliam who set him up. The police just did the paperwork at the end. In Band of Bikini Bottom, the Krusty Krab only gets shut down because the police chief's wife doesn't like fun. The law doesn't matter anymore, it's all about who's pulling the strings. So maybe the police aren't incompetent by accident, they're incompetent by design. A convenient shield for whoever's really running the show. And that's where things get interesting. Because there's one name that outranks the chief, the warden, and quietly sets marching orders for the whole department: the commissioner. And here's the kicker. He only ever appears twice in the entire series, but both times, he looks suspiciously familiar. Pat, fancy suit, same shade of green as our old friend, the Green Mare. Coincidence? I don't think so. They have to be brothers, or at the very least, cousins. But it's the same bloodline running through both City Hall and the police department at the same time. And once you notice it, the whole pattern clicks into place. Of course the cops look like clowns most of the time. Of course they suddenly get smart whenever Squilliam or the police chief's wife is pulling the strings. They're not built to protect citizens, they're built to be controlled. And here's where the mystery deepens. If the commissioner is pulling strings inside Bikini Bottom, then why is there also a Navy? Krabs did mention serving in it.
It's my memory chest from my years in the Navy.
And in Good Neighbors, they literally roll out a tank to fight Squidward's house. You don't build a standing military unless you're expecting a big conflict. And that's when I realized there are nations under the sea that we've never been shown. Which means Bikini Bottom is part of a larger system, one with enemies, borders, and power struggles we've never actually seen on screen. Now, it all makes sense why Bikini Bottom feels so chaotic all of the time. The mayors are ceremonial, the police are clowns, the commissioner keeps everything dumbed down on purpose because the real power isn't even in the city. It's higher, it's national, maybe even imperial. And that brings us face to face with the other forces we've been ignoring this whole time. The monarchy of King Neptune and the royal family. Neptune himself is basically a god-king entity in this show. He can order executions on a whim, he can imprison anyone without trial. Even in the movies, his own daughter Mindy can't stop him without begging for mercy. And there appears to be no legal process or other government body with the power to overrule his decisions. This would fit with his name, being the Roman god of the sea, and would explain why there's no checks or balances to his authority. When God wants to do something, there's no power on Earth that can prevent him from doing it. But then it gets really strange. If Neptune is the supreme ruler of the sea, then what's the point of Bikini Bottom having mayors, police, or a commissioner in the first place? The answer is probably the same as in a lot of real-world monarchies: home rule. Neptune doesn't have time to micromanage every single city under the sea, so he lets towns like Bikini Bottom govern themselves as long as they remember who really sits on the throne. But Neptune isn't the only piece of the royal puzzle, because once you factor in Patrick and Gary, the plot thickens. Patrick should have been locked up a dozen times over. Property destruction, assault, destroying the Krusty Krab on multiple occasions, but the police rarely touch him. Why? Because in Rule of Dumb, we learn he's part of the royal family. Not in line for the throne like Gary, but still a starfish with royal blood. Arresting him permanently would be an insult to the crown. As for Gary, while he has nothing to do with the Bikini Bottom government, it at least explains why he's so intelligent in the first place. It's because he's worthy of a king. When you look at it that way, the whole setup kinda makes sense. Neptune holds the crown, the royals get immunity, and the mayors just play dress-up politics. But that's also where things stop adding up. Because if Neptune really is an all-powerful king, why is there a military at all? Why do we hear crabs talk about serving in the Navy or see tanks roll out during Good Neighbors? You don't need armies and fleets just to keep one goofy town in check. Surprisingly, the clues are everywhere. Think about it. New Kelp City is running independent from Bikini Bottom. Rock Bottom has its own language, its own transport system, even its own culture so different from Bikini Bottomites. And then there's Atlantis, an advanced civilization with technology so far beyond Bikini Bottom that it feels like a different planet. Even the surface world shows up sometimes, like the pirate crew in Sponge Out of Water. The Navy is basically an armed force to maintain balance or dominance in a world full of enemies, not to keep the citizens in line. So after digging through all these layers, what do we actually find? Ironically, this would also strengthen the case of Bikini Bottom having corrupt rulers. Since the royal family is living their lives however they want and basically ignoring everything as long as it doesn't threaten the crown, and the Navy only cares about fighting outsiders, it means local leaders can blunder around however they want. Bikini Bottom is dysfunctional by design. But we still haven't reached the scariest part of the mystery. If the mayor and commissioner are running this as a two-man show, how did they come up with the idea? Or are they just puppets too, pawns in a larger scheme? Okay, let's just say that all this chaos and incompetency was rigged. Then who actually benefits from keeping Bikini Bottom this way? Because someone has to. Remember earlier when I said that plankton and crabs always get away with any crime they've done? Why do you think that is? Plankton is branded as the most dangerous inmate and literally kept in a separate cell. But watch, every time he's caught, he slips out in minutes. Sometimes he's even released early because the jail's too full. That doesn't sound like how you'd treat your biggest criminal. That sounds like how you'd treat a mascot. Someone you want stirring up chaos as long as he never wins. Now, what about crabs? This guy violates labor laws on a daily basis. He overworks SpongeBob and Squidward, pays them pennies, serves rotten food, even kidnaps his employees once or twice. And yet the only time he ever really faces consequences is when he annoys the police chief's wife in Band in Bikini Bottom. And the time he got caught with the stolen Krabby Patty's secret ingredient in Patty Caper, but that's only because the police were already on the scene. Even SpongeBob himself, if you think about it. Nobody causes more property damage, traffic accidents, or plain old panic than SpongeBob. Yet the cops don't touch him. Why? Because he keeps the Krusty Krab running. He keeps the money flowing. Neither the mayor nor the police ever really protect the people. What actually stays protected every single time are the businesses, the banks, the flow of money. One big clue to this assumption lies in safe deposit crabs. The mayor himself shows up to open the bank. Not a hospital, not a school, or any public place, the bank. As soon as it's opened, what happened? It gets compromised by none other than the greedy Mr. Krabs himself, and in one of the most stupid ways possible. You would think that someone who broke through bank security would get sent to prison, or at least heavily fined. But not here. They just kick Mr. Krabs out the door. They even give him his deposit back, with interest. And what about the Bargain Mart, the Chum Bucket, and yes, the Krusty Krab? They're part of the food chain that keeps Bikini Bottom running. Krabs gets away with his crimes because he funnels money back into the system. Plankton is kept around because his constant failures make Krabs stronger. And SpongeBob? His chaos keeps the citizens distracted, while his work keeps the Krusty Krab profitable. The cycle is just perfect. The corporations feed the government looks the other way, and the city keeps running in circles, poor, chaotic, distracted, but still pumping out money. Which means the real government of Bikini Bottom isn't the mayor's office, or the police, or even Neptune's castle. It's the faceless boardrooms and bank vaults behind the scenes. That's why the mayor can vanish and respawn without anyone caring, and why the cops chase parties instead of criminals. And that's why the city never really changes, because the system is working exactly as designed. And if that feels uncomfortably familiar, well, maybe that's the point. A reflection of how our own governments use figureheads, distractions, and corporate power to keep citizens confused while the real decisions are made behind closed doors. So no, the question was never who runs Bikini Bottom. It's why does Bikini Bottom run this way at all? And now we know the answer. I knew it was a mistake letting those greedy politicians run the government. Squidward Tentacles is not who you think he is. In fact, he's not even what you think he is. For years, fans have argued, is Squidward really a squid, or is he actually an octopus? Squidward's father himself, Jeffrey Tentacles, confirmed that it was one of his best jokes to name him Squidward, even though he's an octopus.
I mean, his name is Squidward, but he's an octopus!
But here's the problem. Squidward doesn't actually look like a normal octopus at all. He doesn't look like the other squids either. In fact, Squidward doesn't fit anywhere. And that's when I realized maybe we've been asking the wrong question. Because after days of digging through episodes, background details, and hidden clues, I stumbled on one of the strangest discoveries in this whole Solved series. What if Squidward is the deluded descendant of Atlantis itself? I know how insane that sounds, but once you start lining up the evidence, it all points back to a forgotten bloodline. A bloodline that explains why Squidward has always felt out of place, and truth be told, explains why his life is actually one of the saddest tragedies in SpongeBob history. As I said before, Squidward is supposed to be an octopus, but take one look at him. Other octopuses in Bikini Bottom have 8 arms full of suckers, and their big blob-shaped heads are basically their whole body. And they certainly don't have a big dangling nose covering their mouth. Plus, all of their tentacles practically serve as arms and legs equally. Meanwhile, Squidward has 6 stubby limbs, 2 for arms, 4 for legs. He stands upright and walks like a human. It almost feels like he evolved beyond what you'd expect from a regular octopus. Now sure, you could argue that almost everyone in Bikini Bottom walks around like a human. Krabs is standing on 2 legs, Patrick does, even SpongeBob himself walks like a human, even though he's a sponge. But at least everyone in their species is consistent. All starfish in this city look exactly like Patrick. All crabs look like Eugene, and all sponges, though they come in different colors, look exactly like SpongeBob. So I started wondering why the Squidward species is the odd one out. After all, Squidward is not the only one that looks like that. There are loads of other so-called octopuses that look like Squidward. And the show itself knows this is weird because when SpongeBob shows us a primitive version of Squidward and feral friends, it is a real octopus with 8 tentacles. This suggests Squidward and his kind are an evolved branch of octopus, something between a regular octopus and something else. But Squidward's weirdness goes beyond his body. Every other citizen of Bikini Bottom is comfortable being exactly who they are. SpongeBob embraces his optimism, Patrick is content with being dumb, Mr. Krabs is greedy and proud of it. Squidward, though, is obsessed with being something else, almost as if he wants to be someone else. It's a running gag at this point that Squidward always believes he is destined to be something bigger than a fast food cashier. His world is stuffed with classical music, Renaissance-style self-portraits, marble core sculptures, and a literal Moai head house. Aesthetics that feel imported and not exactly grown in Bikini Bottom. At first, I thought it was just a funny character design, but the more I pulled this thread, the more it felt like a subtle hint from the writers. A suggestion that Squidward's longing for higher culture isn't just a wild dream, maybe it's a memory of something older, a standard he can't quite name but desperately chases. What's even weirder is that when he finally gets what he claims to want at Tentacle Acres, he still feels hollow and pointless. He doesn't feel right surrounded by his own species. He's different, and he knows it. We always thought the Squidville episode was about Squidward learning to value SpongeBob and Patrick. Behind all the yelling and hatred about their shenanigans, Squidward truly enjoys being slightly weird and childish, just like his neighbors. But now I've realized maybe Squidville is the clue we need, a breadcrumb pointing to Squidward's hidden identity. Think about it. If Squidward just wanted peace and quiet, then Tentacle Acres should have been his paradise, right? An exclusive community built only for his own kind, golden gates, identical houses, clarinets on every corner. On paper, this looks like everything he ever dreamed of. Yet Tentacle Acres still feels wrong for Squidward. Everyone there lives the exact same life. They ride the same bikes, eat the same food, play the same instrument. There's no variety or spark in their days. I just couldn't understand, why would an entire community of Squidwards build golden gates to shut the world out, only to lock themselves inside a suburb of boredom? So hear me out. I think Tentacle Acres is only a copy, a shallow imitation of something they've always dreamed of. Because if you look closely, Tentacle Acres feels like a knockoff version of Atlantis. The gates, the exclusivity, and the whole promise of perfection. It's definitely a reference to Atlantis, but without the culture or history and without the true purpose of an advanced civilization. And I think Squidward subconsciously knows it, though he may not fully realize it, he understands that Tentacle Acres is not the real thing. This may sound exaggerated. I can already hear you guys saying, come on, Squidville isn't that deep. But don't you remember? There's another episode that plays around with the idea of Squidward and his exclusive community, Cephalopod Lodge. Once every few months, Squidward sneaks away to a pyramid-shaped building. Inside, he puts on a robe, does secret handshakes, and joins a group of cephalopods in ancient rituals. Now here's the important part. The lodge claims its traditions go back for centuries. Their initiation ritual even involves facing down a moray eel, as if every new member has to relive some ancient feud. Mind you, this isn't just a goofy club like Goofy Goober. It's a secret society built on superiority. Outsiders are treated like heretics. When SpongeBob and Patrick sneak in, the leader acts like the sacred order itself has been violated. And Squidward? He takes it deadly serious. He says,
"This almost makes the other 353 days worth living for."
See that? Unlike Tentacle Acres, Cephalopod Lodge gives Squidward the fulfillment of a secret society. So ask yourself, why would Squidward pour so much meaning into a club that seems designed only to exclude others? Why does he care so deeply about rituals, robes, and rules that most of Bikini Bottom doesn't even know exist? Suddenly, Squidward's obsession with exclusivity no longer looks like personal vanity. It looks like a memory, a generational memory to be precise. Knowledge passed down through generations, societies, and bloodlines. Which brings us back to the question we've been asking all along. What is Squidward, really? Unsurprisingly enough, Atlantis Squarepantus gave us the biggest clue to answer that question. Early in the episode, before anyone even says road trip, Squidward is already in the museum praising Neptune's ascension, the only surviving painting from the great lost city of Atlantis. And listen carefully to the way he talks about it.
All the inventions you take for granted were given to us by the Atlanteans. Their advances in art, financial wealth, and weaponry were eons ahead of their time.
He recognizes the amulet, names the city, brags about the streets of gold, and gives a mini lecture. Atlanteans advanced art, wealth, weaponry, eons ahead of their time. It's like he grew up with the stories. Then on the trip, everyone sings about what they want from Atlantis. Krabs wants treasure, Sandy wants science. Meanwhile, Squidward wants...
As a connoisseur of fine art, Artlantis, my art will be prophetic.
He's here to make history, guys. He knows what he's gonna do. And when they arrive, he's the first to scold the gang for wrecking the topiary garden. Details that no one else cares about, he notices immediately. My man has respect for the culture, instinctively. Instead, he locks onto the Hall of Arts. LRH, the Atlantean leader, asks, "What is art?" And Squidward answers academically.
Art is the conscious arrangement of elements in a manner that affects a sense of beauty.
LRH pushes further, says, "Art is what happens when you learn to dream." And Squidward steps into paintings like he's crossing a border back home. He breaks into song about being a living work of art and lands the line that broke my mind.
Isn't this great? Isn't this neat? I'm a living work of art, from my head to my feet. I can wait for your impression to congeal. That Atlantis is where I want to spend eternity.
It takes Squidward less than a day in Atlantis for him to be fully convinced this is his true dream. This is where he belongs for the rest of his life. Even the Atlanteans accept him. One artist literally says,
"I'm really digging this squid's form."
So Squidward decides to stay and inspire them while the others keep touring. Later at dinner, he's fully satisfied and says, "I've learned more about painting in a few hours here than I did in 4 years of community college." Atlantis completes him as a person. And when it's time to leave, his final line is a last-ditch confession.
And back to my depressing life of quiet desperation. Turn this bus around!
But it's too late. The ancient bubble is gone, thanks to SpongeBob and Patrick, and the long dream of living out his life in Atlantis stays as just a dream. So we ask the big question, why does Atlantis feel like home to Squidward when nothing else does? Remember about Squidward's body? The part we thought of as a weird design choice? Because this is where everything makes sense. Now compare him inside Atlantis. The aesthetic faces, long noses, lips, posture, palate aligns with Atlanteans more than with any cephalopod in the Seven Seas. Squidward also strangely shares the same interest with Atlanteans. Whether it's classic music, styles of painting, or Roman cultural references, they both practically worship it. All these details are too good to be coincidence. I'm convinced Squidward is a long-lost descendant of Atlantis. Now, of course, the show itself never really said anything canonically about this connection. After all, SpongeBob as a show never really gets in too deep with stuff like this. But I think the story about Squidward's predecessors is not hard to guess. Based on what we saw in Atlantis Squarepantis, we've not seen any other race other than Atlantean. That means this place also takes pride in their race exclusivity. And since it was explained that the Atlanteans brought the ancient bubbles with them when they first colonized planet Earth a long time ago, there's no picture of anyone other than an Atlantean there, so it's safe to say no Atlantean married anyone other than an Atlantean themselves on their home planet. But there's never been any details about the time of their arrival. We could assume that the Atlanteans might be very open to everyone when they first arrived. After all, it's only sensible to be civil toward the locals, right? They would share their culture, technologies, even their wealth to regular fish in the seas. And if you do know something about colonization, it's not a rare case for any of those newcomers to get married and form new families with locals. In fact, this practice was really common throughout mankind's history, even going back just a few hundred years. Somewhere in that time, an Atlantean bloodline intermarried with cephalopods, an octopus to be precise. The result, generations later, is Squidward's species, six-limbed, human-postured, art-obsessed, carrying a cultural memory he can't explain and a yearning he can't satisfy. And every few generations, the diluted traits line up, and one descendant looks and thinks more like an Atlantean than an octopus. That's Squidward, the one in his species who actually creates art, seeks patronage, and thrives only in Atlantean halls. And what happens to the rest of his kind? The ones who remember fragments of greatness but can't access it? They build copies. Tentacle Acres is a copy of Atlantean perfection, golden gates but with no soul. Cephalopod Lodge is a copy of Atlantean exclusivity, rituals without enlightenment. and Squidward is the inheritance stuck between them. He's the one who remembers genetically and culturally what his people were aiming for, yet he's trapped living inside their cargo cult leftovers. I mean, Squidward said about himself one time, blowing bubbles is in his genes.
It's in my genes.
Maybe he wasn't exaggerating. By this point, nothing else will work. Not Bikini Bottom, not Squidville, not even his own species. Because beneath the 6 tentacles in the clarinet, Squidward is Atlantean. Or rather, the diluted descendant of an Atlantean. A proof of a time when Atlantis opened its gates, mingled with locals, and then shut itself off forever. Which, ironically, is the darkest part of the story. Because if Atlantis really did once welcome outsiders, why did they stop? Why did they exile bloodlines like Squidward's? What makes the people of Atlantis shut themselves in and make their palace exclusive? I think the answer is pretty clear, right? I mean, the episode itself perfectly explained it. Because somewhere in that time period, they met a lot of people like SpongeBob and Patrick, people that didn't share the same values as they did. Chaotic, restless, short-sighted locals who couldn't respect Atlantean culture. I'm willing to bet that there's an accident somewhere similar to these ancient bubbles, where locals just act foolishly and end up destroying something important. So the Atlanteans decide to make a big decision, to exile anyone of mixed race or mixed blood from Atlantis in order to keep their bloodlines pure, including Squidward's race. Which brings us to the hard truth this story's been hiding. Squidward actually found home in Atlantis, recognized it, and then lost it all over again. So, after finding this connection between Squidward and the Atlanteans, it's safe to say that Squidward's life only became more and more miserable over time. After all, we keep discovering the tragic truth behind the grumpy cashier at the Krusty Krab. If Atlantis shuts its gates, the only thing waiting for Squidward is a mundane life in Bikini Bottom, a town so chaotic, so unorganized, and truly unfit for someone as special as Squidward. SpongeBob SquarePants is often seen as one of the most lighthearted, chaotic shows in animation, but once in a while they decide to drop something dark. And for many years there has been one episode in particular heavily misunderstood by the fans. I'm talking about Earworms, an episode that seems like just another SpongeBob joke about catchy songs until you understand the real message. When I went back to rewatch it, I expected a throwaway episode. Instead, I found strange details that I'd never noticed. Visual choices, dialogue, the way characters react, the way SpongeBob changes, something much more dark. And the song itself? Well, let's just say it's not as innocent as it sounds. So I followed that thread, and what I found was surprisingly jaw-dropping. It changed my whole impression of the episode, and I think I've finally solved the darkest episode of SpongeBob. Let's take a closer look and start from the beginning. The episode starts out like any other day in Krusty Krab's. SpongeBob's just doing what he always does, annoying Squidward with relentless enthusiasm. But instead of jellyfishing or karate chops, SpongeBob's latest obsession is a pop song called Musical Doodle. It's a peppy little jingle that plays on the radio while SpongeBob's cleaning the Krusty Krab, and for some reason, it's a jam. He doesn't just like the song, he loves it. He attaches to it. The song burrows into his head and he sings it practically all day. He hugs into the radio, singing it while flying home, and later even bought a vinyl to be played at home. Now, I know what you're all thinking. This is just a regular day of SpongeBob, right? Nothing out of the ordinary. But sadly, this is just the beginning. SpongeBob wasted no time playing the song once he got home. And after the song ends, he plays it again, and again, and again. SpongeBob was so infested with the song, he literally repeats the song until late at night. Even when he's trying to sleep, his body refuses to let go of the song. His lips whistling by themselves, even his pores start whistling the tune. This is giving me bad dreams. Eventually, SpongeBob gives in. He stays up all night looping the song, completely gives up on rest, just chasing that little serotonin kick like it's a drug. So the next morning, he stumbles into work like he's been hit by a bus. Dark circles, bloodshot eyes, jaw twitching. This man has seen things, or heard things. Mr. Krabs tells him to get it together, and SpongeBob responds by laughing. It's not even a happy laugh, it's the laugh of someone who's halfway through a breakdown. But instead of actually focusing on the job, SpongeBob keeps singing the song and hits us with a new strategy. I should stop fighting the Doodle's infectious groove. You know where this is going. From here on out, he spirals. He starts messing up orders, throws soda at the customer's face, refuses to hear any complaints, all while singing.
I asked for no onions! You're gonna listen
Oh, man!
to the music.
Krabs definitely doesn't like it because he starts losing money, so he gave SpongeBob one last warning.
You gotta cut out that singing, boy.
SpongeBob tries to fight the song one last time, but it's just too strong. SpongeBob loses the fight and succumbs to the pressure, and this is where the madness starts. The kitchen turned upside down. Lots of murals made from mustard on the walls. SpongeBob's laughing alone in the corner, talking to himself like he's stuck in a mental loop. The episode doubles down when Krabs confronts him.
You're done for the day.
SpongeBob suddenly goes feral and runs around on all fours while laughing. You know what's messed up when Patrick is speechless? Eventually, Sandy steps in and finally gives this madness a name. A literal earworm. A squirming musical parasite wrapped around SpongeBob's brain, force looping the song on repeat. And yes, it's a real worm next to his bluish brain. This episode also confirms that music-based brain parasites exist in Bikini Bottom. Cool. And the only way to cure him is by replacing the song with something catchier? Fortunately, his friends try to help. They swatted SpongeBob home, tie him to a chair, force him to listen to sea shanty and then Texas country songs, but neither works. It's only when Squidward plays his clarinet, out of tune, that the worm is finally forced out. The clarinet was basically audio tear gas. They gave the worm sonic trauma. And for a brief moment, you think it's over. SpongeBob collapses in relief, but then the worm turns, sees Squidward, and suddenly, it's his turn. The episode ends without resolution, but with a transfer. Like a curse that never leaves, it just finds a new host. So yeah, you could say it's a weird little episode about a catchy song, but everything about it, the decaying visuals, the frantic obsession, the eerie repetition, all of it feels too intense to be a joke. It all points to something much more intense. And that song? That doesn't sound like SpongeBob being silly. That sounds like a warning. Like the show is trying to tell us something and hopes we're paying attention. And the more I watched, the more I realized this wasn't just an episode about a song stuck in your head. I couldn't shake that feeling, so I started digging. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. This episode is hiding something. Actually, it's hiding a lot. So we're going to break it all down, 3 theories that could finally explain what earworm is really about. Some are psychological, some are symbolic, and one might just change the way you see SpongeBob completely. First theory is, this isn't just a catchy song. It's an evil brainwashing plan. Think about it. SpongeBob doesn't just like the song, he becomes possessed by it. He stops functioning and physically deteriorates. The song has hijacked his nervous system. I mean, if you actually listen to the lyrics of Musical Doodle, they're not just quirky or catchy, they're borderline dark. Infected. That's not an exaggeration. That's a diagnosis. The song isn't just stuck in his head, it's been engineered to stay there. Not because it's good, but because your brain can't stop needing it. One lyric even gives away the trick. It's a metaphor for dissociation, for losing your grip on reality while your body keeps going. The song becomes your new reality and you vanish inside the loop. And here's where it gets really dark. One moment in particular shows just how deep it runs. SpongeBob tries to sleep but can't, because his body is turned into a playback device. He's not singing anymore, he is the musical doodle. Some viewers even said the song got stuck in their heads for days after watching, which begs the question, did the worm get us too? But here's the question nobody asks. Where did it come from? And how did the worm infect SpongeBob? Who made this song? Did it just randomly spawn in your house like the nematoda? We never see the worm go inside SpongeBob, unless... does the worm come with the records? It all makes sense. SpongeBob was humming the song earlier in the day. Sure, he was a little obsessed, but he was still SpongeBob. Then he brings home the vinyl, with that unnerving, smiling face printed on it, and everything changes. After it hits the turntable, it's over. What if the record is the delivery system? And the singer, the one belting out those eerie hypnotic notes? It's the actual mastermind behind this madness, hidden in a melody designed to hijack your brain. This isn't just a single release, this is a biological weapon, through melody. They're not trying to entertain you, they're trying to own your mind. The worm itself is an actual parasite, a creature that latches on to his head like a sci-fi leech. We see it wrapped around SpongeBob's brain, jamming to the beat. And it's not just messing with his thoughts, it's affecting his body. Look closely and you'll see one of his nerves has already turned blue. In the ocean, blue sea sponges are often poisonous, different from the yellow ones. My theory is that if SpongeBob was left untreated, he would slowly transform. Every nerve turns blue, his identity fades, and what's left? A walking jukebox. A living carrier for the song, shambling through Bikini Bottom, spreading musical doodle like a pandemic, and even then, the worm doesn't really die when it's forced out, it just searches for new prey, like to keep the cycle going. It's really an effective strategy to brainwash the whole city, which means this isn't just a personal attack. Maybe SpongeBob isn't the only victim here. There could be a lot of people having the same troubles. It's a citywide infection strategy, disguised as pop music. So yes, musical doodle might be brainwashing, but here's the thing about brainwashing, it doesn't just target your brain. It preys on something deeper, your wants. And that brings us to the second piece of the puzzle. Let's look at this from another angle. What if earworm isn't just about brainwashing, it's about addiction? Not the chemical kind, but the kind we live with every day. The song SpongeBob hears, musical doodle, it's not deep or emotional. It's designed to be shallow, catchy and repetitive. It's a pop jingle, the kind you hear in an ad or a hit song with zero lyrics beyond a hook. And SpongeBob, he treats it like gospel. He buys the vinyl, loops it on repeat, he builds his whole night, his life, around it. Even as everything around him starts falling apart, he doesn't care because the song is fun. Sound familiar? It's the trap. And here's where the episode starts hitting a little too close to home. SpongeBob doesn't even question it. He doesn't evaluate it, he just needs more of it. You could replace musical doodle with literally anything. Bingeable shows, viral TikTok clips, sugary snacks, doom scrolling. Stuff that feels good, takes over our brain, and pulls us into a routine where we stop thinking. In that sense, musical doodle is a symbol of modern consumer obsession. A product we believe we want, even if it makes us worse off. Look again at Krusty Krab's kitchen during the spiral. It's messy. There's mustard graffiti everywhere, his walls are literally crumbling. The illusion of pleasure is so strong, but SpongeBob can't even see the destruction. And remember when Mr. Krabs threatens to fire him? SpongeBob just laughs it off. He laughs like none of it matters. Why? Because by then, the product has consumed the user. SpongeBob's no longer living his life, he's just playing the loop. He's a doodle puppet. So yeah, maybe the earworm isn't fully at fault here. It's something we invite in because we crave it. But once it gets in, once it loops long enough, it changes you. And that leads us to the final theory of the spiral. The one taking SpongeBob somewhere more dark. Something far more personal. This here's the one that really hits home. The psychological angle. What if the whole episode is a metaphor for intrusive thoughts? You know, those mental loops that won't go away, the ones you try to fight, but the harder you push back, the worse it gets? SpongeBob tries to resist at first, but eventually he breaks. Not because he wants to, but because he's exhausted, and here's where it gets weird. Maybe even symbolic in some part of the episode. SpongeBob never asks for help. Now, while SpongeBob isn't the brightest creature in Bikini Bottom, surely even he could recognize when something wasn't right. But in the episode, not once does he acknowledge that he needs help from his friends or family. That's how intrusive thoughts work. They don't show up like villains, they wear your face. And by the time you realize they've taken over, it feels too late to fight. His house and the Krusty Krab fall apart the more the song takes over. It visualizes the song's damage to his life, cluttered, broken, impossible to live in. Once you fall into this pit, you lose everything dear to you one by one. These symptoms sound familiar to you? It's because it's a sign of mental health issues. An addiction, obsessive behavior, even depression. So you remember that Krabs tries to physically pull the worm out, and Sandy said it won't work? Because it will damage his brain. It's kind of weird at first. SpongeBob definitely could take some brain damage, right? He has already done that so many times. It just felt like plot bridging so they could all sing their own personal favorites. But it actually symbolizes how brute force can't fix mental illness. When you're so deep in the pit, no amount of physical treatment will fully heal you. They subtly tell us that the only way to replace bad memories is by creating new ones, no matter how crap it is. Well, it's always better to replace it with better memories. You get the idea. Squidward's clarinet is awful, indeed, but it's the only thing that breaks the spell. This tells us that maybe discomfort is the cure. It's not a pretty cure that saves you, it's something raw, honest, kinda ugly. And after that, there's still some subtle details in the episode. When SpongeBob's finally free, there's a brief moment where he's completely drained, just empty. The thing that possessed him left a hole behind, or added a hole in this case. So, which theory is right? It's tempting to pick one explanation and stick with it. Brainwashing, consumerism, psychological breakdown, pick your poison. But the more I studied this episode, the more I realized None of these theories stand alone. Instead, they feel like layers of the same idea. A bigger picture the episode is hiding in plain sight. And once you connect every single one of them, that's when you see what this episode is really about. It starts with a jingle. Musical Doodle is a parody of manufactured media, made to stick, not to matter. Catchy, shallow, addictive. And SpongeBob, he takes the bait completely. He buys the vinyl, loops the record, builds his entire night around it. Even as everything falls apart, because the loop feels good. And once you've accepted it, once it feels safe, that's when you stop noticing the changes. This is where the line between entertainment and control blurs. The song isn't just stuck in his head, it rewires him. SpongeBob's nervous system starts turning blue, a visual sign of total infection. His body becomes a playback device, and his thoughts no longer feel like his own. Just like modern-day doom scrolling, this isn't about what you like, it's about what you can't stop. The content becomes background noise, and then it becomes identity. Eventually, SpongeBob stops fighting. He accepts the voice in his head, accepts the decay around him, and in doing so, he becomes something else. Just a living vessel for the song. But there's still one question left. Why SpongeBob? Why did this happen to him, the most joyful, unbreakable, optimistic character in the show? Unless that's exactly why it happened to him. What if the real twist of this episode isn't how he broke, but what was he before he broke? Because there's one loop that's been playing far longer than Musical Doodle, the one we never even noticed. After everything we've seen, the decay, the breakdown, the silence after the music, it's clear this isn't just a story about a song, or even a parasite. It's about SpongeBob, and the version of him we all take for granted. Think about who SpongeBob is. SpongeBob is the most optimistic character in Bikini Bottom. He works a dead-end job, gets no respect, loses sleep, gets pushed around, and still all smiles. But what if that smile is a cage? What if that version of him, the happy sponge, the perfect worker, the always cheerful performer, is just another loop? Another musical doodle. This episode isn't just showing us what happens when the loop gets too loud. It's showing us that maybe there's another loop already being played. SpongeBob only makes a scene now because he lost his previous loop. What if SpongeBob has always been infected? Not by this song, but by the need to be SpongeBob. He's caught in a cycle of pretending to be okay, of smiling through exhaustion or dancing while falling apart. The brainwashing? That's how it starts. The addiction? That's how it spreads. But the darkest part is when you forget who you were before the loop began. And most haunting of all, the lyrics are telling just that. SpongeBob thought he was safe inside that performance, but the reality is he was trapped. Not by the worm, not by the music, but by the expectation to always be SpongeBob. Look closely. SpongeBob isn't fighting the worm. He's fighting himself. Or at least, the version of himself he's afraid to let go of. And look at the final moments. SpongeBob collapses, drained, not cheering, not grateful. He doesn't look free, he looks empty. Because when your whole life becomes a loop, freedom doesn't feel like relief. It feels like a loss. That's why the cure is so uncomfortable. Squidward's awful clarinet breaks the spell not because it's music, but because it disrupts the illusion. It's not pleasing, but it's real. Earworm is one of the darkest SpongeBob episodes ever made, not because of monsters, but because it reminds us of something terrifying. You can lose yourself completely, and no one will notice. And if SpongeBob, the most optimistic character in the show, can fall into this kind of mental loop, what does it say about the rest of us? What does it say about the roles we perform, the habits we repeat, the thoughts we can't shake? In the end, Earworm is subtly creepy because it's realistic. So many of us have lived it, singing the life we don't like, stuck in a thought we can't escape, trying to smile while everything inside is screaming. And the real question isn't, why can't SpongeBob stop singing the musical doodle? The real question is, when did the music start playing in your head? So the next time you hear a song stuck in your head, stop and ask yourself, is it really just a song? Or is it something else? And once the music starts, who's really in control? But at least this episode didn't have too many disturbing visuals. The kids could still enjoy it. There's one disturbing episode that's always stuck in my head. SpongeBob and Patrick skipping work to ride the Fishing Hooks Carnival and gets pulled in the process. It's pretty straightforward. But now that we're older, the episode feels different. Mr. Krabs shows up like a doomsday prophet. SpongeBob and Patrick just can't stop riding the hooks. And SpongeBob's punishment is harsh. Almost as if the episode's wanting to tell us something bigger. So I went back to rewatch it again, but what I found out is shocking, to say the least. And once you see what it really might be about, you'll never watch it the same way again. Immediately, the episode starts with a weird scene, above Bikini Bottom. 3 realistic fishing boats casting lines into the sea, with the French narrator saying,
"Fishermen have quite an effect on our undersea friends."
Then it cuts to the Krusty Krab, where things are perfectly normal, until Mr. Krabs slams through the doors in distress.
They're back, I tell you!
He's not subtle in saying it either. He yells about the hooks to everyone's face with a cracking voice, but nobody listens. They all look at him like he's just being dramatic, like old Krabs is finally losing it. Even Squidward ducks into a trash can to avoid the conversation. And this is the first thing that bothers me. The people might have seen this happen more than once before, like it's just a regular thing, so they've chosen to ignore it. SpongeBob, of course, is the only one who seems to take Mr. Krabs seriously. He asks what all the warning is about. Krabs gives him a very intense warning. That the hook is back, don't go near the hooks, don't even look at them too long. He says they dangle down and draw you close with their pleasing shapes and their beguiling colors, which is oddly specific. They even made a live demonstration, giving Scooter the most painful looking wedgie just to make a point.
Then higher and higher!
And here's where the tone shifts a little. Krabs says something worse happens if you get hooked, that they'll cook you, eat you, or worse, put you in a gift shop. I remember that line quite vividly, to be honest. Because if you were like me, I watched this episode early in the 2000s, around the same time Finding Nemo came to theaters. Also, spoiler alert, the setup was quite the same. The old guy Merlin comes babbling to Nemo about don't go somewhere near those surface creatures. So yeah, I kinda get the horror behind the got kidnapped by strangers thing. But back to Bikini Bottom again, we cut to SpongeBob working the grill, carrying this warning in the back of his mind. Then Patrick shows up in the window, says the carnival's in town and they should go together. But SpongeBob can't go, he's working. So Patrick convinces him, says it's not leaving, it's just taking a break. And that one line sets the disturbing theme for the episode. They arrive at the carnival, but it's clearly not a regular one. It's a field full of dangling hooks, swaying in the water like they're waiting for something. And again, no one else is around. Except Patrick says there was a kid there earlier, and now he's gone. Just a pair of empty shoes on the ground. This is looking a bit dire for a kid's show. SpongeBob then realized this is the hook thing Mr. Krabs warned him about. But Patrick doesn't give a damn. He puts his ass on the hooks, plays with the cheese bait, and puts some more in his mouth.
Does this look dangerous?
This entire scene is fascinating because the danger is visual and clear. SpongeBob's scared, the hooks are literally grabbing things and pulling them up, but the mood keeps bouncing back to comedy. Even when Patrick gets yeeted upward by a hook, SpongeBob thinks he's gone for good. He runs around shouting for help in a full-on panic. But then, Patrick floats back down, laughing like it was just an attraction ride. Patrick says it's fine as long as you jump at the last second. That moment broke SpongeBob's resolve, because whatever fear Mr. Krabs gave him, Patrick just proved it otherwise. Or at least that's how it looks. So, SpongeBob gives in. He jumps on the hook and gives it a ride. And it's fun, it's exhilarating. Even the fishermen on the surface fight to reel them in, but the boys jump off just in time, giggling all the way down. Womp womp, Mr. Fisherman. But you know who's not having a fun time? Squidward. Back at the Krusty Krab, everything's falling apart without SpongeBob. The grill's a disaster, customers are rioting, and Squidward's getting mobbed. Mr. Krabs realizes SpongeBob is gone. He's also mad at the fact that SpongeBob took a break.
No one's taken a break at the Krusty Krab since the Chum Famine of '59.
He starts tracking SpongeBob with his nose and finds both of them playing with the hook. So Krabs slams into a rock trying to stop them. And when they float back down, Krabs doesn't hug them, he snaps. He tells them what really happens when you go up too far. Apparently the gift shop wasn't the worst fate either. He says you end up vacuum-packed in a can of tuna, with nothing to look forward to but the smell of mayonnaise. Fortunately, both of them apologize. They promise to stop. They even recite a sailor's vow. Yo ho, near the hooks we'll never go. And if the episode ended there, it would just be a funny little cautionary tale. Sadly, it doesn't. Cut to the next day, SpongeBob says he's ready to prove himself. He wants to be loyal and trustworthy to Mr. Krabs. But then Patrick calls him over again. Same field, same hooks. SpongeBob actually resists now. Said that he made a promise. Again, Patrick doesn't care. says that he had his fingers crossed and Krabs is a dummy. He even goes as far as pulling the choosing friends card. But SpongeBob holds his ground. He actually pushes the hook away, calls it a liar and a deceiver. My boy really learned a lesson. Just kidding. SpongeBob comes down laughing, thinks he's fine, until he turns around and realizes he's actually hooked. In the pants, too. So he panics. He runs to Mr. Krabs for help, but he doesn't come right out and say it. He tries to hide it. You know, play it casually, pretend it's not a big deal. But it doesn't last long. He finally confesses and shows that he's hooked.
It's in there pretty deep.
And what happens next is kind of surreal. Mr. Krabs says there's only one thing to do, to take his pants off in front of the girls. It's time for embarrassment, ain't it? Well, SpongeBob did remove his pants, but the hook is still there, because it's also hooked in his underwear. Now, with Pearl and all her friends watching, SpongeBob has to go all the way. Krabs also says it's fine if he couldn't. He's just gonna search for another fry cook and puts up a help wanted sign. But after one final pull from the hook, the underwear snapped. The sign launched SpongeBob back and smacks him into the window of the Krusty Krab, naked. The girls obviously made fun of him. But as one final twist from the episode, turns out it's Squidward who placed the hook all along. It's all a plan with Mr. Krabs to give SpongeBob a lesson. And the final shot is SpongeBob running home, crying, while everyone else is just fine. Or not really. A tuna can gets shipped off to Patrick's house, which contains Patrick in it. That's the end. There's a lot to process here. It's funny and weird, obviously, but watching this episode as a kid, I get the clear message not to play with fire, especially the stuff adults clearly told you not to do. It will only bring disaster. Even more, SpongeBob's character is well depicted as an innocent child, so that's clearly emphasizing the tone of this is a naughty kid who got punished kind of episode. But now that we're grown adults, this episode just feels different. Maybe it means more. Something much more dark and unhealthy, to be precise. What if this episode isn't really about the hooks? What if I told you this is a story about temptation, peer pressure, and about what happens when you fall into something you don't fully understand, disguised as a kid's cartoon? Most people already know the drug metaphor take. The hooks look fun, they're dangerous, Patrick's reckless, SpongeBob gets peer pressured, it all lines up. But if that's all we say, it's not really a solved video. So here's another theory I want you to know. Hooky is a snapshot of what SpongeBob used to be back in season 1 when the writers were still brave enough to lean into darker, unsettling ideas before Nickelodeon started to smooth off the edges. And when you rewatch the episode with that in mind, there's certain details that stand out that most people miss. For example, the empty pair of shoes at the carnival. Patrick says there was a kid there earlier, and now they're gone. It's just one quick shot, but the camera lingers on the shoes just long enough for it to register. That's horror movie language. That's the writer quietly saying, this is what happens when you're stupid enough not to learn from somebody else's mistake. Or look at Mr. Krabs' warnings. He doesn't just say, don't touch the hooks. He paints the whole picture, being dragged up, cooked, eaten, or worse, sold in a gift shop. Now, think about it for a second. Being commodified, turned into a product, or sealed in a tuna can with nothing to look forward to but mayonnaise isn't a joke. Oftentimes, someone who has a crippling addiction to drugs would have to lose everything they own and not rarely make themselves into a commodity with nothing to look forward to but mayonnaise. Now here's the part that really stuck with me. It's the fact that SpongeBob doesn't ask for help right away. He's ashamed to admit that he relapsed. He sneaks in, fidgets, tries to play it off like nothing happened. And when he finally admits it, he says, I'm hooked. I'm so ashamed. That line hit harder than I expected. Like they've let someone down, or worse, become something they're not proud of. Often thinking, how do I get here in the first place? They would also have to suffer being labeled, mocked, even disowned by the people closest to them. That's what makes it disturbing. It's really familiar. But at least he admitted it. He opens up to Krabs and asks for help even though he knows he'll get a good old scolding for that. Now, let's talk about the humiliation itself. SpongeBob gets naked in front of a bunch of girls and runs away crying. It's slapstick. But if we take the metaphor seriously, that scene is the writers showing us the shame cycle. When someone finally admits they've slipped, whether it's drugs, alcohol, gambling, anything like that, you lose privacy and dignity. You lose whatever version of yourself you were trying to protect. It's something you have to do in order to fully recognize the situation you're in, and more, to make a fresh start for the greater good. The way the show frames it, SpongeBob loses everything. Pants, underwear, confidence, and then he gets slammed against the glass like an exhibit. Everyone's calling him SpongeBob Nudie Pants. And Krabs just stands there and watches. He knew it was Squidward all along, but truth be told, I'm really glad it was Squidward holding the rod. Their idea of teaching SpongeBob a lesson was public humiliation, or a prank. Even though it still doesn't make any sense how Squidward has done it. How could he cast the line that looked like it came from the surface? It's just cartoon logic, I think, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is that Squidward is willing to pull a prank on him. Yes, you could say that Squidward is just mad because he got mobbed by the customers yesterday. It was SpongeBob's fault after all, so he wants to have revenge. But it also shows how much Squidward cares for SpongeBob. As much as he's annoyed by his loud neighbor, he doesn't want SpongeBob to end up in a tuna can. So he agreed to give SpongeBob a lesson, even though he kinda didn't want to admit it.
Well, that was more of SpongeBob than I needed to see.
This also means that Mr. Krabs set up the scene by intentionally inviting Pearl and her best friend to have a glass of water at the Krusty Krab so they could make fun of naked SpongeBob. Which is kinda messed up if I'm being honest. But hey, it all worked in the end. And then we get the final punchline, if you want to call it that. SpongeBob runs home humiliated. But Patrick? Patrick gets delivered in a can of tuna. Again, it's just Patrick being Patrick, but remember, SpongeBob got caught, confessed, humiliated, and learned something. Patrick didn't. He never stopped or learned anything. What's also crazy is that I'm pretty sure Patrick knew what happened to the kid. He knew that the kid got snatched to the surface and got sent to a gift shop. However, he also knew that once you end up in a tuna can, you will get sent back to your home, and all you need to do is open up the can.
Oh, does somebody have a can opener?
Patrick doesn't even seem bothered. I think it's not the first time for him. He knows no matter how deep his addiction gets, no real harm will happen. There's no such thing as going too far, right? Which is also something a true addict would say. They convince themselves there's no such thing as too far, that the consequences don't matter. No matter what happens, they'll be fine. So why stop? This could also explain why the rest of Bikini Bottom didn't take Krabs' warning seriously. They know the hook thingy is not something new, and the only thing they could snatch is some dumb kids like Patrick. No one in their right mind would fall for such a cheap trick, so why bother? Just let them be. Now, a lot of you would think, wow, you're going far with this theory. Sure it's not just you overthinking? The answer is no, I'm pretty convinced. Once you see the context, you'll understand why this theory carries weight. In fact, some of you older fans might remember something about this. This episode aired in 2001, right at the turn of a cultural moment. In the late 90s, the US was facing a huge problem with drugs, especially synthetics like ecstasy, marketed as feel-good drugs but leaving behind a trail of overdoses and deaths. By the early 2000s, things got worse. The first wave of the opioid crisis was beginning, and overdose deaths doubled in just a few years. These were the headlines everywhere, the fear and the taboo that parents and schools quietly talked about. And knowing Hillenburg, a teacher before he was a showrunner, you can see how this kind of story would make sense. Hillenburg wasn't just pulling random imagery out of nowhere, he was slipping in a commentary that every adult in 2000 would have understood. Kids would see slapstick, but parents would see the quiet echo of a national crisis. And here's where I think the writers slipped in something clever. Remember the very first line of the episode? The French narrator said, "Fishermen have quite an effect on our undersea friends." That's the writers tipping their hand. Think about it, these hooks aren't made in Bikini Bottom, they're not from this town. They're lowered in by outsiders, imported into a community that doesn't fully understand them, only to snatch away anyone dumb enough to bite, which is the way drugs were flooding into American cities at the time. So when the narrator casually says, "Fishermen have an effect," that's the writer winking at us, pointing out how dangerous forces slip into our lives from the outside, changing everyone's lives before anyone realizes. That's the code. The reason the episode feels so disturbing, so different in tone, is because it's SpongeBob's writers leaving behind a message for educating drugs disguised as silliness. Temptation looks fun, addiction makes it worse, and if you ignore the warnings, the hook will always catch you. That's kind of amazing, huh? At the end of the day, Hooky isn't just a fishing episode. It's a story about temptation, about the pull of bad decisions, and about how hard it is to admit when you've messed up. I'm quite amazed to find out how an episode could serve as two different stories, for kids and adults at the same time. It's a golden episode for a reason. SpongeBob SquarePants is hiding one of the darkest world-building rules in kids' TV. You've probably noticed that in Bikini Bottom, the fish can wear each other's skin. Now obviously, some of these gags are just jokes, but some of them are genuinely concerning. And because the show does it so often, we've all just gotten used to it. It feels like just their thing, right? Nothing to see here. Well, that's what they wanted you to think. Because when you actually slow down and take a good look at every single one of these skin moments, you may notice something. Those skins are hiding the true secret of Bikini Bottom. Sounds crazy, right? I know. But after days worth of searching, I managed to collect all the evidence, enough to solve this mystery for you. And the scariest part, the show itself gives us subtle clues to prove that this is canon. Now, before I get way ahead of myself, I had to point out the part that actually makes sense, or at least almost makes sense. Some of these skin moments are actually clever biology jokes. For example, Patrick is a starfish, and if you know anything about starfish in real life, you know they can regrow arms if they're chopped off. In fact, that's how some of them reproduce in the first place. Same with SpongeBob himself. Sea sponges can break apart infinitely, and each piece can keep growing by itself. So when SpongeBob rips off his skin and later grows it back, yeah, it's weird, but it's still within sponge logic. Mr. Krabs? He's a crustacean, and crabs really do molt. They shed their shells and grow new ones as a part of their life cycle.
I've molted!
Even Gary losing his shell isn't too far-fetched. Snails in the real world sometimes abandon damaged shells and adapt into new ones. Sometimes it's not even a real shell that they use, it's just whatever's available and they live with it. It might be weird to see, but it's not unusual. This makes sense since Stephen Hillenburg, the creator of SpongeBob, was a marine biologist and even taught marine science before becoming a showrunner. So if you factor that in, these jokes are actually kind of clever details that only a biology nerd turned writer would sneak into a kid's cartoon. To be honest, if the show only did this kind of thing, I'd say, sure, skin theory is just SpongeBob writers geeking out about biology. A little gross, but nothing deeper. But that's also the trick. It's a clever smokescreen they put up to make us think it's just another goofy SpongeBob quirk. Because once you start digging, you'll realize the show keeps pushing the skin jokes further, past the line of science, past the line of logic, into something way more disturbing. Remember this one? SpongeBob using Mr. Krabs' entire shell and walking around pretending to be him. He even uses it to attend the Navy reunion pretending to be Krabs. And somehow, no one said anything about it? They just believe it's the real Eugene? These sailors literally served with Krabs for years. You're telling me they actually believe SpongeBob is Krabs just because he's wearing his shell? His eyes are different, his voice is different, even the way he speaks is different from the real Eugene, right? They're too busy admiring the almighty shell of Eugene Krabs to care who's actually inside it. And then it gets stranger. Plankton disguises himself by stealing Sandy's fur and uses it to trick everyone to get the Krabby Patty recipe, which is creepy enough for several reasons. Because one, that's not how squirrel fur works. A squirrel doesn't shed its own skin like crabs do. And two, what's worse is the disguise works. People are actually buying it. I mean, sure, technically this time is better since some people do notice that something feels off.
Sandy? You don't look so good.
No reason to be suspicious in any way, y'all.
But it surely can't feel right seeing a land mammal without both of its eyeballs. She's also walking around without her spacesuit, which is something she needs to be underwater. Does everyone just accept any kind of half-baked explanation as long as she's speaking with a Texas accent? Or is that just how Bikini Bottom works? It's just odd. And then it takes a hard left into full-on disturbing. Squidward greeting the kids while wearing salmon skin might seem absurdly funny at first, until you remember Squidward here is wearing someone else's body and face as a costume. Of course the kids threw rocks at him, they're just freaked out by his costume choices. But then again, the redfish is actually looking like a prop costume. You can see the hole in the suits for his tentacles and it doesn't cover his face. So as scary as that sounds, it's just the equivalent of Kevin Hart wearing the Rock's look as a costume. But none of that compares to the next case. because arguably one of the most crazy and absurd skin moments in the show is the final sequence from I Had an Accident. Like, how? How did a gorilla get Patrick's skin in the first place? Patrick's gorilla suit is perfectly normal. Many of us humans wear gorilla costumes as a joke. But Patrick's skin? Where did you get that? I mean, I know Patrick did lend his skin suit to SpongeBob that one time in Bummer Vacation. But that was Patrick giving SpongeBob his own skin willingly. I don't think he's giving it willingly to this gorilla. Patrick himself seems surprised when he sees the gorilla. Then again, it is Patrick we're talking about. Maybe he just forgot that he gave it to the gorilla for some free ice cream before 4 p.m. Who knows? Now, every single clip I showed you always involves the main cast. SpongeBob, Squidward, Sandy, Patrick, Krabs. So maybe it's just their special thing for the plot? Like, maybe the show writers only let the main characters do this gag because they're the stars of the show. It's not like the regular fish walking around Bikini Bottom could do the same thing, right? Wrong. Actually, there are lots of fish in Bikini Bottom pulling the same skin suit stunts. A random mailman could shed his own skin twice and reveal entirely different kinds of fish each time. How many more does he have under that? How about this guy? The scammer who was disguised in his own injured skin to trick SpongeBob and Patrick. How does that work? Do you just keep all the skin you shed and store it for later use? Or is it something handmade, purely to scam people? Even some background fish at the Krusty Krab pulled off this stunt. He got the whole bodysuit of an entirely different fish and used it as a new identity. You'll catch fish with completely different faces, arms, and skin tones just swapped out on a daily basis, like they went shopping for parts and mixed them up that morning. And that raises a big suspicion. Maybe nobody bats an eye to those weird, out-of-place disguises because it's a normal thing in Bikini Bottom. Any fish could wear somebody else's skin and that's that? Nobody questions their identity? And if swapping skins is this common, then where's it all coming from? You don't just stumble across spare skins or body parts lying around. That means there has to be an entire economy behind it. At this point, it starts to feel like Bikini Bottom is hiding a full-blown black market for bodies. Wait, they do. They sell it freely and legally.
So please, browse our extensive wall of noses.
Patrick goes in to have a nose extension surgery one time. Yeah, he did. And strangely, nobody treats it like horror. It's just, hey, Patrick's got a nose now, like going to the dentist. What's also concerning is that the place is called Nose and Things. Does that mean they have other body parts in there? Ears and mouths, maybe?
I heard that.
Yeah, they do. Which means this isn't even a hidden crime. This is just the world they live in. This is their version of consumer culture. You can swap out parts of yourself at will and society just shrugs. And it doesn't stop at that. Bikini Bottom is full of products built on this idea. Remember anchor arms?
Well, now you too can have muscles. With anchor arms! Just add air.
They sell inflatable muscles as if it's gym gear. The entire commercial is just fish buying fake limbs to impress people. And if there's anything we know about these modified body parts, it's that they aren't really built to last. Patrick's new nose got destroyed just by the sheer amount of stink by the end of the episode. And the anchor arms are basically just cosmetic, without any real muscle. So I take it there's some limit to this kind of stuff, but then there's also another body modification project that not only changes their physique, but goes so far as to alter their personalities. In Abrasive Side, SpongeBob gets a rough side that he attaches to his back to stop being such a people pleaser. But it did much more than help him say no.
Oh, I certainly said... No, can't do, you brainless lab rat.
I need you to work an extra 17-hour shift tonight.
Oh, sure, mister. Sorry, Krabs, I'm busy. Unless you're paying me overtime.
That abrasive sponge brings out SpongeBob's bitter side and makes him roast people left and right, which is actually kind of nice. I really like seeing SpongeBob roasting people. Anyway, don't forget the medical professionals. Remember the snail doctor from I Was a Teenage Gary? Look at him. His hands are clearly different from his body. They're different colors, and instead of fins like regular fish, he has hands, complete with 5 fingers. They're definitely not his real hands. It does have some justifications though. If you're a doctor performing surgeries on a daily basis, I guess it's helpful to have human hands rather than just fins, right? Then again, if your doctor shows up with arms taken from a totally different species and nobody even blinks, that means this culture is already built for it. At this point, I think we can stop pretending it's random cartoon nonsense. This show is giving us a clear answer. Bikini Bottom has an entire hidden economy built on skin swapping and body modification. Clinics, shops, products, scams, surgeries, it's all there. The only reason it feels hidden is because the characters treat it like it's normal, and the only one who thinks it's weird are just us, the viewers. And the wildest part, if you really think about it, SpongeBob and Patrick themselves might be right in the middle of it. He knows how to handle skins, he's done it before, he knows how they work, he knows how they trick people. And when you look at his lifestyle, it actually makes sense. He's a fry cook at one of the lowest paying jobs in town, yet somehow, some way, he's always got new props, costumes, furniture, even entire rooms full of gadgets. Way more than his paycheck should ever cover. Where's that money coming from? Well, maybe flipping burgers isn't his only gig. Maybe SpongeBob's other job, the one nobody talks about, is flipping skins. Selling, trading, moving parts through Bikini Bottom's underground market. Think about it. His body regenerates infinitely. That means an infinite source of material. SpongeBob can literally print money with his own body. The same could be said about Patrick, since he's another person with infinite regenerating ability. Well, maybe not with Patrick. The guy still lives under a rock with 90% of his furniture made from sand. He even loves to eat sand for breakfast, and the only times he ever gets some real food is at the Krusty Krab, and he almost never pays for it. We've seen it time and time again, Patrick getting scolded by crabs because of his enormous tab. Such a shame, Patrick. Your body is literally made out of gold and you're too stupid to cash it in. You could buy as many Krabby Patties as you wanted if you only knew. Wait, is that how he always pays his patty bills? It always baffles me why Krabs the cheapskate still gives Patrick Krabby Patties again and again, even though it's proven that Patrick never has any money in his wallet. Does he just trade his body parts or skin to pay Krabs? That also means maybe the Krusty Krab itself isn't just a restaurant. Burger joint in the front, skins in the back. And if that's true, does it mean the skin theory canonically explains the secret Krabby Patty recipe too? It's just fish meat and skin all along? Even if that's halfway true, then the Krusty Krab is feeding them themselves. Anyway, even if you set aside the recipe, the point still stands. But that still doesn't answer all of our curiosities. Because let's just say this is the normal way of their world, and they've lived like this for quite a long time. Then we've got to ask the next big question. Why? Why does Bikini Bottom, out of all places, normalize this kind of thing? How did this culture even arise in the first place? Again, the show never really answers this, so it's up to us fans to interpret it. And wouldn't you know it, I already have a guess, as always. The easiest way to explain it is to compare it straight away to something we already have in real life, plastic surgery. For humans, the practice of body modifications has been widely known since the 70s, and is routinely used for both medical and aesthetic reasons. The thing is, those surgeries and body modifications usually stop at small changes. Nose jobs, implants, tattoos, hair transplants. You can only tweak or replace what you already have. You can't just wake up and decide, yeah, I think I'll have tentacles today. But under the sea, the rules are completely different. Think about it. Us humans, though we come in different races, still share the same body features. One head attached to the torso, 2 arms and hands, and 2 legs with feet. That's pretty much it. But the ocean is packed with thousands of species, each with wildly different bodies. Some have shells, some have claws, some have giant teeth, stingers, or even bioluminescence for those who live without the sun. Some creatures can literally change color and shape on command. And you're telling me that all of these fish just accept the body they're born with? Of course not. It makes total sense that in a place like Bikini Bottom, body envy becomes a cultural obsession. I wish I had claws like a crab. I wish I had tentacles like a squid. I wish I was fast as a dolphin. And thanks to clinics, surgeries, and products, they can actually do it. What started as small enhancements, like Patrick wanting a nose, could spiral into full transformations. Then companies started selling new parts like fashion accessories. Anchor arms weren't about strength, they're just aesthetics for identity. And eventually, it wasn't even about looking good anymore. It was about experimenting, mixing and matching body parts just to see what you could become. Of course, they also had an option for someone who just wanted to look like they were in better shape, without a huge commitment to surgery like Patrick. So they started selling full body costumes that could be worn on a daily basis, like for the fish at the Krusty Krab. When you think about it that way, all the skin gags suddenly make sense. They're the byproduct of living in the most diverse ecosystem on Earth, where everyone is constantly surrounded by creatures with abilities you'll never have. And in that environment, it's only natural that an entire culture would form around body modification by literally trading skins, organs, and features like they're collectibles. Which brings us back to the show. Because once you accept that this obsession exists, suddenly all those bizarre skin moments in SpongeBob start popping back into your head. And that's when we get to the part that creeps me out the most. Because skin theory doesn't just explain biology gags or scam characters. It actually explains some of the weirdest plot points in the whole show. Once you accept that skin theory, the show itself starts to look completely different. Let's go back to some of the strangest skin moments and watch them again through this lens. Remember this one? SpongeBob fools everyone in the Navy with Krab's shell, and nobody bats an eye. But if skin swapping is the real cultural norm, then the Navy sailors don't question it because they've seen this before. They're used to friends showing up in recycled shells or skins. They're fooled because in their world, that's just life. Or this one. Plankton sneaks into Sandy's fur and uses it as a disguise. Now, in our world, that's pure nightmare fuel. I mean, imagine your close friend showing up without eyeballs or a spine. That's pretty terrifying. But in Bikini Bottom, it doesn't even get a second glance. Maybe Sandy just wanted to ditch her eyeballs for a while. Maybe she's tired of lugging a spine around. Maybe she's finally joined the sea creatures and swapped out her lungs for gills. In this world, you can't judge that. And then there's the mailman. His double shedding looks weird at first, like why would you need 2 extra bodies under your skin? But with skin theory, it's actually a sad story. Maybe he doesn't feel confident in his real body. Maybe his coworkers make fun of him, so he just slips on another skin to live a normal life as a mailman. When you look at it that way, Bikini Bottom actually feels like a pretty progressive place, a society that accepts diversity, whether it's natural or manufactured. Who would have thought? And then there's this.
Back inside yet? What's a gorilla doing underwater in the first place?
At face value, it's one of the most absurd endings in SpongeBob history. A gorilla rips off his Patrick skin and then rides off into the sunset with George the zebra. It's insane. But with skin theory in place, it weirdly makes sense. It's the ultimate confirmation that skin swaps exist in-universe as real, transferable identities. When the gorilla said, "They're onto us," and ran off with George, they're not talking about SpongeBob questioning the logic about why a gorilla and a zebra could breathe underwater. After all, it's a show where they had fire and a beach, Goo Lagoon, deep under the sea. That's not exactly mind-blowing. What is mind-blowing, however, is SpongeBob about to realize the true intentions of their attack. Notice that the gorilla just put Sandy and Patrick into the bag, but instantly snapped SpongeBob in half the moment it saw him. The gorilla just wants to get rid of SpongeBob. Now, here's where it gets wild. The gorilla goes so far as to disguise himself in Patrick's skin just to sneak onto Conch Street. It only blows its cover when suspicion arises. Why would anyone go through all that trouble? Unless the gorilla wanted SpongeBob's position as the fry cook at the Krusty Krab. Sounds ridiculous, right? But hear me out. Do you know who this gorilla is? That's right, he's the fry cook at the poop deck from episode Friend of Foe.
What? They let a smelly, hairy flea bag like that serve food?
I think he's just tired of working there. I don't blame him though. Working with Patchy the Pirate doesn't sound like the best gig. So what if this gorilla decided to make the jump, got himself modified to breathe underwater, traded Patrick's skin for some ice cream or whatever Patrick would agree to, then made his move? Eliminate SpongeBob and claim the spot as Krusty Krab's new fry cook. Alright, at this point I can already hear some of you thinking, what the hell, this theory seems far-fetched. Gorillas don't make any body modifications or take anyone's skin. How does that relate to the theory? Aha, but then, how do you explain this? Because the same gorilla just made another appearance years later on Gorilla Suit Day in Season 16. See that thing in his head? It's a fish gill. So yes, This confirms it. The same gorilla from I Had an Accident had body modifications in order to survive underwater. Or maybe he's wearing the skin of a real sea gorilla. This show has a sea bear one time, why can't they have a sea gorilla? And before you ask, are you sure that's not just some random sea gorilla and not the same one in I Had an Accident? I can assure you it's the same gorilla. I made sure to check the wiki pages for this. So there you have it. The show itself confirms this theory. Pretty wild, right? Anyway, now you understand that the skin theory is merely a reflection of society where identity is fluid and everybody's up for trade. Which begs the final and most disturbing question: if the everyday citizens of Bikini Bottom live like this, how many people are still real? Because if you ask me, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about the application of this theory is Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, and pretty much all of their villain nemesis. Think about it. On the surface, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are exactly what they look like. Parodies of Aquaman and his sidekick. Two retired human superheroes who just happen to live under the sea. At least, that's what we all thought growing up. But the details don't add up. For one, if they're supposed to be humans, why are they the exact same size as every other fish? Humans should tower over the residents of Bikini Bottom. Instead, they blend right in. Two, it's proven that their powers aren't natural gifts. Every ability they have comes from gadgets, utility belts, rings, contraptions. They don't control the sea creatures like Aquaman, they just fake it with technology. So here's the real possibility. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy aren't humans after all. They're fish. Fish who modified themselves surgically and culturally to look like humans. Look at Mermaid Man's body. The starfish nose, the human-like lips, the upright stance. It's the exact same type of modification we've seen in other fish, just pushed further. And Barnacle Boy? He's literally a fish who swapped out almost everything until he became something else. I would bet the diving fins in his legs aren't diving fins at all. They're his actual fins, he just covers them up with boots. And it doesn't stop there. The same could be said about Man Ray. One time we even saw him take off his head and give it to SpongeBob, and he walks away fine without it. The mask could be a gadget after all. His real body is only from his torso to his legs. But the real punchline is that Bikini Bottom buys it. They accept these two legendary superheroes and every other villain not because what they do, but because of what they look like. Because in a culture obsessed with skins, the ultimate status symbol is wearing the body of something you could never truly be. And that's what skin theory has been pointing to all along. It's the hidden lore of this world that, oddly enough, explains all the weird stuff that happens in Bikini Bottom. There's a black market economy in Bikini Bottom running on skins and body swaps, and SpongeBob with his regenerating body is the perfect main character that quietly shows us how it works. That's how we can afford things a fry cook shouldn't be able to. That's why Patrick is always eating without paying. That's why the Krusty Krab itself feels bigger than just a burger joint. Because in the end, Bikini Bottom is powered by identity, by the skins you can trade, the bodies you can wear, and the lives you can borrow. Heroes, villains, even background citizens, they're all living proof of it. Which means skin theory isn't just some random fan theory anymore. It's the secret backbone of Bikini Bottom that canonically answered all of our questions about the show.
If you want the flip side of tonight, less there's a secret architecture holding this together, more nope, that one's just not good, go watch that one next. I'll see you on the next dive.